Chapter 791. The surface of the thick yurt was covered in a thick layer of frost. Illumination gems scattered the darkness, illuminating pale and frightened faces. But it didn't bring them any warmth at all. The old patriarch and his uncles had all died. This was a connection between bloodlines. At such a close distance, there was absolutely no mistake. After shock and sorrow, despair enveloped them. The desert world was approaching the end of its life, but they hadn't grasped the method to leave this place. Their only fate was to fall into eternal darkness with this world and die in the endless cold. Hong Xiao hugged her knees. Her eyes were empty and vacant. She still couldn't accept the fact that the old ancestor and the others had died. Wu, a companion, cried out. She looked around in panic. Are we really going to die here? I don't want to die. The atmosphere in the yurt became even colder. The youths of the giant spirit race thought that this was just an adventure to increase their knowledge and experience with their elders. They never imagined that death would suddenly knock on their door. Hong Xiao looked around in a daze. She pursed her lips and said, "Don't be afraid." She couldn't finish her words. Unless they could find a way out, anything she said now would be powerless and pale. Her eyes darkened, but at this time a light rustling sound entered her ears. Hong Xiao flipped over and stood up. She pushed open the yurt's door. Under the dark and gloomy sky, a figure walked over in large strides. His entire body was wrapped in black robes. No matter how strong the winds blew against him, it outlined his heroic figure. Many, many years later, when she became the new patriarch of the giant spirit race, she would clearly remember this scene. In a mountain valley, Qinyu stopped. He turned and said, "All right, let's stop here." He paused for a moment and then continued, "Go back and tell the others of the giant spirit race that you have completed your mission. From now on, don't involve yourself in anything related to the Dragon City Master and live a good life." Space rippled. He stepped in and vanished from sight, leaving behind a group of young giant spirit race youths who had just escaped death. They looked at each other in dismay. "Hong Xiao, what do we do?" Hong Xiao bit her lips and took a deep breath. "No matter what, we must return to the race as soon as possible and tell them what happened in the Yellow Sand world." Everyone nodded. Before leaving, Hong Xiao looked in the direction Qinyu left in, confusion in her eyes. Just how did the old ancestor and the others die? Why couldn't they be given an answer? Although you might think that I'm colder by saying this, there's too much soft-heartedness, and it will kill you sooner or later. The ancient's calm voice sounded out in Qinyu's mind. There weren't too many fluctuations in his emotions, but the tone of his voice left one's heart cold. You are the only remaining bloodline of the ancient race in this world. You should always remember what you carry on your shoulders. Qinyu nodded. I will work hard to change this habit. The ancient didn't continue on this topic. After a moment of silence, he said, I originally thought that what was imprisoned in the desert world was something I needed, but it seems that I underestimated the Tao monarch's caution. I'll leave the ancient's heart with you for now. If necessary, you can use its power. You could feel a thought leave his body. He let out a deep breath and looked into the distance, a thoughtful look in his eyes. Just what are you trying to do? You still couldn't figure this out. But perhaps not too long from now, someone would help him unravel this mystery in his heart. After the grand event came to an end, there was still a bit of clamor in the air, but it had already started to give off a feeling of loneliness. The dense flow of people on the streets had mostly dispersed in a short period of time. At most, in another 10 days or half a month, everything would return to tranquility. The Beast Arena automatically sealed itself. It was hidden beneath Dragon City. Only no one knew that in the depths of the Beast Arena there was an ancient blue altar. There were countless runes flowing on its surface, and with this place as the center, they flowed in all directions. There was a giant dragon crouching above the altar. Even though they knew that it was only a dragon soul, its lifelike appearance still made people subconsciously hesitate. At this time, the dragon soul's two dragon claws subconsciously collided as it pondered. With light cracking sounds, sparks flew out, illuminating its cloudy eyes. Master's current state was a bit strange. Through the connection between them, the dragon's soul could faintly sense that its master was incredibly strong. In other words, its master didn't need to rely on that boy at all. Reviving him would be a simple matter. What was the reason? The dragon soul lifted a claw and tapped its head. Indeed, its master's wisdom was something that someone as stupid as itself could never hope to match. Since its master didn't give it any instructions, it would just follow the normal procedures. It was time to activate the foreshadowing he left behind in the past. Shadow Clan. 9 dragons wove together on the stone walls, filling the air with an invisible pressure. Suddenly, a fluctuation spread out from the stone walls. A deep dragon roar sounded out, and 9 dragon phantoms held out, their powerful auras surging outwards. This sudden change alarmed the entire Shadow Clan. With the sound of breaking air, several figures arrived. The one leading them was the Shadow Clan Patriarch. As he saw this, his eyes widened and he revealed a look of ecstasy. This is bang. The stone walls shattered and Jolie was wrapped in an invisible strength as she flew out. Her eyes flashed open and the 9 dragon phantoms roared together, turning around and fusing into her body. The Shadow Clan Patriarch fell to his knees and respectfully said, "Your Highness Dragon Envoy, I welcome your arrival." Jolie's eyes were blank for a moment before she soon composed herself. She thought for a moment and slowly said, "Patriarch, how long was I in seclusion?" In the grand hall, Jolie lowered her head, deep in thought. She listened to the Shadow Clan Patriarch speak of everything that happened after she went into seclusion. When she heard that the mysterious black-robed cultivator from the Hidden Fog sect had safely returned to Dragon City, she revealed a look of excitement. But soon, this excitement turned into indifference. This was because, according to the Patriarch, he had displayed an incomparably formidable strength. So, this person definitely wasn't Qinyu. After using him, had he personally arrived and interfered in the battle of the arena? Ning Qin. A cold light surged in Zhou Li's eyes. "Patriarch, I would like some peace and quiet." "Your Highness, please rest. I bid my farewells." The Patriarch bowed and drew back. The tranquility of the grand hall wasn't maintained for too long before it was disrupted by the noise outside. Zhou Li frowned, let him in. Soon, Jian rushed in, a look of pleasant surprise on his face. "Zhou Li, you've left seclusion." When the young girl had decided to go into seclusion, he had felt a deep sense of loss. He had thought of leaving Dragon City, but in the end he had decided to stay. Looking at it now, this decision had been the right one. Seeing Ji Yun's heartfelt happiness, Zhou Li's expression relaxed a little. I didn't tell you ahead of time. I apologize." Ji Yun waved his hand again and again. It's fine. He looked at the young girl in front of him. In just a short period of time, her appearance hadn't changed, but the feeling she gave off had changed far too much. Between her eyebrows, although there was still a trace of immaturity that hadn't faded, there was an even more awe-inspiring majesty. She was like a supreme empress, one that made one instinctively feel awe. "You are now," Jolie said. "I'm fine. I've never been better." She paused and said, "Jian, if possible, I hope to go to the Western Tomb and pay a visit to the Divine Seat." Ji Yun was startled. He immediately nodded. "No problem." He could faintly guess why Zhou Li was going to the Western Tomb. While he felt bitter in his heart, he also couldn't help but rejoice. Luckily, he was already dead. That's right, although the black-robed man from the Hidden Fog sect had returned and his appearance hadn't changed at all, he was no longer the person Zhou Li cared about. Regarding this, Ji Yin and Zhou Li had the same judgment. Zhou Li nodded, no longer speaking. Her expression was faint, but the depths of her eyes weren't calm. As the patriarch had said, the strength that Ning Qin possessed was something that even the current her might not be able to contend with. Thus, she had to join forces with the Western tomb. Chapter 792. Salenda City, Swanluan Inn. There had always been rumors that it belonged to the bloodline of the Castellan, who had a heterogeneous bloodline. This was not difficult to see from its name. However, this was just a deliberate lie. The inn had been respectfully handing over part of its profits for many years, so the Castellan's mansion kept silent about this rumor, neither confirming nor denying it. This vague attitude, coupled with the fact that the owner of Swanluan Inn was a beautiful woman with money and power, made people feel unfathomable. Even some of the peripheral forces of the Castellan's mansion maintained respect for Swanluan Inn, which made people who didn't know the truth even more awe-inspiring. But today, Swanluan, who was always smiling and calm, showed a trace of nervousness on her face. She looked up from time to time at a box on the second floor of the inn. Even though the guest in the private room had only said 3 sentences to her, and his tone was very calm, every word revealed an invisible pressure. Some of the eyes fell on her, and instantly froze Swanluan's practiced smile. She had never encountered this kind of pressure that went straight to the depths of her heart. She couldn't afford to offend them. Although she didn't know who the 6 black-robed people in the box were, Swanluan didn't doubt that they could make her never turn over a new leaf with a finger. As for the fabricated background of the Castellan's mansion, even if it was true, these people wouldn't care. Another wave of guests was respectfully sent away with the excuse that the entire second floor was temporarily closed for the day. Swanluan could only use this method to reduce the probability of causing an accident. All these years, she had been dreaming of holding on to a real thigh, but she didn't dare to have any ideas about the people upstairs. There was no reason, but just thinking about it made her feel instinctively afraid. The light at the front door of the inn flickered, and a figure stepped in. Swanluan, who was confused, didn't notice until she heard some fragmented conversation. "Sorry, the second floor is closed." "Yes." "I'm really sorry. I have an appointment with a friend here." "Okay, maybe it's wrong, huh? An appointment with a friend?" Swanluan suddenly turned around, and her heart suddenly shrank. Black robes again. "Wait a minute." After saying that loudly, she walked over quickly. "Hello, guest. I am the owner of the inn. May I ask how many friends you have invited?" Qin Yu looked at the beautiful woman in front of him, her voice respectful and her eyes filled with awe. His thoughts stirred, and he guessed what was going on. He said, "If I'm not mistaken, there should be 6. "That's right. Fortunately, I reacted quickly and didn't offend this lord." Su Onluan bowed and said, "Your friend is already waiting for you in a private room on the second floor. I'll take you up myself. Sorry for my rudeness just now." Qin Yu nodded. The 2 of them entered the second floor one after the other. "What do you mean? Didn't you just say that the second floor isn't open to the public? Why are you bringing people up now?" The guest who had just sat on the first floor shouted in dissatisfaction. "They're all old customers. I think it's best for you to give me an explanation." Su Onluan's face was pale, and her eyes were filled with panic. She didn't care about these noisy people, but she was afraid of annoying the guests behind her. Qin Yu said, "All right, I know where they are. You can leave." Su Onluan felt as if he had been pardoned. Yes, she took several steps back and left. Then there were several suppressed shouts from downstairs. After a brief period of chaos, everything soon calmed down. This was a woman with some skill. Qin Yu subconsciously thought of something. He stopped after several steps and pushed open the door to the private room. Around the round table, 6 black-robed figures stood up. "Welcome, Councilman Morningstar." This voice belonged to Sage. Qin Yu stepped in and closed the door behind him. The 6 councilmen should have many questions. How about we sit down and slowly discuss them? "Of course." Limitless chuckled. "If I knew that you would become the new councilman, then all the misunderstandings between you and the council would never have occurred." Humph. What I want to know is when Councilman Morningstar plans to hand Yundai over to the council. Oriole's tender voice was filled with a cold intent. I believe that, by now, Councilman Morningstar should be well aware of just how important she is to the council. Qin, you walk to the side of the round table. This is my seat, right? Without waiting for an answer, he sat down. Fellow councilmen, please sit down. From now on we will all be family, so there is no need to be so formal. He turned to the side. Councilman Jasmine? Yes. A gentlewoman's voice sounded out. Qin Yu said, I apologize, but I must tell you that the previous Councilman Morningstar's death had nothing to do with me. Councilman Jasmine nodded. I know. After a moment of silence, she said, if possible, I would like to know if he was in pain before he died. Qin Yu shook his head. He wasn't. Of course, this was a lie. Councilman Jasmine seemed to relax. There was a hint of gratitude in her voice. That's good. She and the previous Councilman Morningstar did indeed have a very good relationship. Lone Mountain suddenly said, I think we can now enter the main topic. His eyes were calm. Councilman Morningstar, I hope that you can bring Yundai back to the council as soon as possible. Of course, in return, the council will give you the benefits you deserve. The room fell silent. All eyes focused on Qin Yu. Qin Yu poured himself a cup of tea and took a sip. As the steam rose, he narrowed his eyes. I apologize, but I cannot do this for the time being. Lone Mountain said, why? Qin Yu swept his eyes over everyone. Councilman, you should know that I have another identity. I am the Holy Son of the Western Tomb Divine Church, and Yundai has already been locked onto by the Dao Monarch's will. If I were to hand her over to the council, everyone would be in trouble. Silence fell once more. The strength of the Western Tomb Divine Church was something that not even the Dark Parliament dared to underestimate. Moreover, it seemed that the Dao Lord who had been judged to have perished was still alive. Simply put, the reason that Qin Yu gave was so strong that it left the Dark Parliament feeling dread. Oriole coldly sneered. Then, Councilman Morningstar, are you saying that it is impossible for Yundai to be handed over to the council? Qin Yu lightly said, I did not say that. I cannot tell you the specific reason. But the Dao Monarch's goal is not the Book of the Chaos. After this matter is concluded, I will bring Yundai back to the council. But before that, I hope that none of you will act rashly, otherwise it will be difficult for me. He looked up, especially Councilman Oriole. There may be some grudges between us, but I do not wish for something similar to the Shadow World to occur a second time. Otherwise, I will not give up so easily. Believe me, even with the restrictions of the council's curse, it may not be able to stop me from doing some things. This was likely a threat. Moreover, it was a merciless and direct threat. Oriole was enraged. But when Qin Yu erupted with strength in the Yellow Sand World, she had no choice but to believe that he did have the qualifications to do so. Later, through the indirect connection between the councilmen, they discovered that Qin Yu's cultivation wasn't too formidable. But it was clear that he had some sort of explosive trump card that could allow him to possess tyrannical strength for a short period of time. This sort of eruption inevitably had a limit, but no one knew where this limit was. At the very least, in the battle at Dragon City, Qin Yu had never fallen into a disadvantage. Enough, Sage said. For this matter, we will temporarily follow Councilman Morningstar's wishes. But I must reiterate that the Book of the Chaos Parliament is determined to obtain it. Qin Yu smiled. Of course, I never doubted this. He rapped the table. Then you can serve the dishes. Sage looked deeply at him. Of course. Today's gathering is to welcome Councilman Morningstar. Su Onluin personally supervised. As he watched the precious delicacies being brought into the box, he let out a sigh of relief. From the looks of it, he had safely made it through. Luckily, there hadn't been any slip-ups. As for the previous guests that had been expelled, although they all had some background, compared to this matter, they weren't anything at all. 2 hours later, the door to the second floor's box opened. But only Chinyu walked out. The other 6 councilmen had already left. Su Onlin was well aware that an existence of this level couldn't be moved by small favors. Thus, she accepted the bill from Chinyu. Of course, the price was already greatly discounted. She respectfully sent Chinyu off. But Su Onlin never imagined that a mistake would occur at the very end. A group of aggressive people arrived outside the inn. Among them was a person with dark circles around his eyes. He was one of the guests that had just been driven out. Su Onluin's heart leapt into her throat. She asked, "What do you want?" "You smelly whore, you actually dared to attack me. Today, I will let you know just how to write the word regret." The man with dark circles fiendishly grinned and waved his hand. "Go, capture her." Su Onluin's heart sank. The several people approaching had calm and restrained auras, and their movements flowed with killing intent. And she had only seen this sort of temperament in one place before, the guards of the city, Lord Mansion. She quickly swept her eyes around and found a familiar young face in the crowd. This person clearly had no intention of hiding anything. He met her gaze and nodded, his eyes filled with arrogance. As she thought, the one who attacked today was from the city, Lord Mansion. But why? For these past years, she had always paid in her profits on time. Her face rapidly paled. Su Onluin knew that she couldn't escape today. Subconsciously, she looked at the silent, black-robed man beside her. Her eyes brightened for a moment before dimming. They weren't related at all. Did he have to help her just because they ate a meal? Bang! This sound was like a galloping bull crashing into a stone at high speed. It was deep and heavy, causing one's scalp to tingle. The several figures that rushed over were sent flying backwards at an even faster speed. They crashed into the ground, struggling to stand up. There was a deathly silence. In the crowd, the arrogant young man's eyes widened. As he looked at the black-robed man who was withdrawing his hand, anger instantly erupted in his chest. At this time, the black-robed man's eyes fell on him. They were calm and indifferent, without the least bit of emotion. As if a bucket of ice water had been poured over his head, the young man stiffened. Endless fear gushed out from his eyes that were filled with anger. At this moment, he felt as if he were prey that had been locked onto by a natural predator. He could be torn to pieces at any moment. Cold sweat covered his forehead and soaked his robes. But he didn't dare to move. Chinyu turned and lightly said, "Are you willing to leave with me?" Su Onluin hesitated for a moment. Then she knelt to the ground. "Thank you, my lord. I am willing." The city Lord Mansion had designs on her. She could hide today, but she couldn't hide tomorrow. Leaving was her only choice. Chinyu nodded in satisfaction at her decisiveness. "Go and make arrangements. I will wait for you here." Su Onluin nodded in gratitude. She stood up and hurried back. The black robes covered the shocked and awestruck eyes around him. As Chinyu was quietly thinking, he didn't notice the surprise that flashed in the young man's eyes. They actually didn't leave immediately. What happened here had already been sent back to the city Lord Mansion. Soon masters would arrive. Whoosh, whoosh. With the sound of breaking air, 2 cultivators broke through the air. Powerful auras tumbled around them, causing the crowd below to stir. Then they fell into a deathly silence. The city Lord Mansions exulted. Many people recognized them and were suddenly enlightened. No wonder they dared to attack Su Onluin. It was because they had been incited by the city Lord Mansion. They didn't know the reason, but there was one thing they were sure of. This black-robed cultivator was about to suffer. These 2 exalted from the city Lord Mansion were second only to the city Lord in strength, and they were both famous masters. If these 2 people attacked, how could he resist? Who dares? The exalted on the left spoke up in a low voice. But just as he began to speak, he swallowed back the rest of his words. The black-robed man on the ground looked up at them. He didn't say a single word, and there wasn't the least bit of his aura surging. But the two exalted felt as if a mountain was pressing down on their chests, making it difficult for them to even breathe. Su Onluin quickly stepped out. As she saw this strange scene, she paused for a moment, a bit more awe in her eyes. "My lord, I'm ready." Qin Yu turned. "Then let's go." One in front and one behind, the two people left the crowd and vanished from sight. It was only at this moment that the two exalted seemed to come back to life. They gasped for breath, unable to suppress the fear on their faces as they looked in the direction they left. After leaving Salunda City, they hurried on the road for several days. Su Onluin thought for a long time. Besides her body, there clearly wasn't anything else that this lord would take a liking to. But Qin Yu didn't say anything. She didn't know what he was thinking. After hesitating for a long time, she clenched her teeth and made a decision. That night, Su Onluin knocked on Qin Yu's door. She stripped herself clean and walked towards him with a flushed face. Qin Yu looked at her nearly perfect naked body, his expression calm. "I have my own reasons for helping you. It isn't what you think. Put on your clothes and leave." Su Onluin was stunned. "My lord!" I don't want to say the same words a second time. Su Onluin hurriedly put on her clothes and left. The next day when they met, Qin Yu's expression was the same as before. It was only after some time that she gradually calmed down. Several more days passed. Just as he said, Qin Yu didn't show any interest in Su Onluin at all. This allowed her to let out a sigh of relief. But at the same time, she couldn't help but worry. She didn't know why Qin Yu had saved her and where he was taking her. A month later, standing outside the towering Western Hill Divine Palace, Su Onluin looked at the countless devout worshippers around her. A trace of panic flashed in her eyes, but she forcefully suppressed it. Qin Yu looked away. He lightly said, "Let's go." He stepped forwards. Amongst the worshippers, a man and woman walked forwards in silence. They were particularly conspicuous. The sharp eyes of the Western Hill Guards had already locked onto them. When Qin Yu passed through the crowd of worshippers and was about to step onto the pure, white divine path that led deep into the Western Hill, a cold shout sounded out. "Halt!" A group of Western Hill Guards surrounded them, their eyes icy cold. "Those who attempt to blaspheme the divine path will be punished with a felony. Seize them." Su Onluin panicked. Everyone knew how strong the Western Hill was, but what happened next caused everyone's eyes to widen. Qin Yu lifted a hand, and a gentle holy light gushed out from his body. It was pure and transparent, filled with a faint majesty. A knuckle-sized saint spirit appeared, constantly singing and praising him. A warm and gentle aura warmed the hearts of those who heard it. Dong! Dong! Within the towering divine palace, deep rumbling sounds rang out. These were the 108 temples, all of them expressing their respect to the incarnation of the ruler that walked the world. The quiet divine path suddenly emitted light. White lotus flowers appeared, and the singing of the living beings became increasingly bright and cheerful. The surrounding Western Hill Guards fell to their knees, their heads touching the ground in deep worship. "We have no intention of offending you. We humbly ask for your forgiveness." The stunned worshippers finally regained their composure. They all revealed fanatical expressions as they gathered from all directions. "My lord, please bless us. I came tens of thousands of miles in hopes that I could hear the will of God with my own ears. My lord, please grant us glory and allow us to bathe in God's grace." Amidst the chaos, none of them dared to approach within 30 feet of Qin Yu. With Qin Yu as the center, they all knelt to the ground, constantly worshiping him. "You are eternal. You are nirvanic. You contain all things. You are summed up as one." Qin Yu spread out his arms, embracing the world in front of him. In front of the supreme ruler, all believers are equal. I hope that his light will bring us true peace. Chapter 793. Within the main temple, the air seemed to freeze. Ji Xiangtian was expressionless. His indifferent eyes were like mountains, as if they could support the heavens. But beneath his sleeves, his trembling fingers revealed his surging emotions. This day had finally arrived. Teacher! His Highness was dressed in the red robes of the grand divine priest. At this moment, the disciple's eyes widened and his face was filled with shock. The scene of holy light raining down from the outside world had a resounding name in the Western tomb: bathing in holy grace. It had no attack power. Compared to the many powerful divine arts, it didn't stand out at all. But bathing in holy grace was an extremely high level of authority. In the entire Western tomb, only the divine seat and the Ji family's old ancestor could use it. It was the highest method to display a miracle on a large scale. Now that it had appeared in front of him so easily, the great divine official was convinced that this mysterious saint's son hadn't made any preparations at all. This was something that even his teacher couldn't do. Ji Xiangtian looked up. His eyes seemed to pierce through space and fall on the figure outside the temple. He slowly said, "Go out on my behalf and welcome the saint's son." "Yes, teacher." The great divine official respectfully bowed. He turned and dragged his wide and dignified red robes behind him as he walked out with heavy steps. He sighed inwardly. Although very few people in the Western tomb knew of this mysterious saint son's identity, his actions today had already attracted the attention of everyone. If he really wanted to seize the authority of the Western tomb, he clearly had the qualifications. Moments later, amidst the worship and praise of countless believers, Qin Yu brought the stunned Su Onluin into the temple behind the red-robed, great divine official. Ji Xiangtian smiled and nodded. "Saint Sun, we meet again." His eyes swept over Su Onluin. There was a flash before he composed himself. Qin Yu bowed. "Greetings, divine seat." He turned. "I'll have to trouble the red-robed, great divine official to take her to rest. There are some matters I need to discuss with the divine seat alone." The red-robed, great divine official respectfully nodded. He looked up at his teacher and saw that he didn't say anything. Then he gestured, "Please follow me." Su Onluin subconsciously nodded. She followed far away before she suddenly regained her composure. A look of fear appeared in her eyes. She turned to look at Qin Yu. When she met his eyes, she didn't know why, but she suddenly felt at ease. After the two of them left, only the two of them remained in the main shrine. Amidst the silence, the previously relaxed atmosphere gradually grew heavy. In the end, it was Ji Xiangtian who broke the silence in the hall. "Holy Son, you seem to have broken your promise." Qin Yu said, "Plans can't change, so I must apologize for this. But I ask that Your Excellency Divine Seat rest assured that I truly have no interest in the Western Tomb's authority. This will not change now, nor will it change in the future." Ji Xiangtian said indifferently, "I'm willing to believe in the saint, but it's best not to use a divine technique like what happened today." Qin Yu nodded. "All right." Ji Xiangtian revealed a smile. "I know that the saint's son came to the Western tomb to see Madame Dorlice. She's currently living in her own shrine. If the Holy Son needs her, I'll personally bring you there." Qin Yu lifted a hand. "There's no rush. There's one thing I need your help with. Of course, it's very simple for you. Saint, please speak." Qin Yu flicked his sleeves, and a spatial gate appeared. A nervous Yundai stepped out. As she saw the familiar, black-robed figure, a look of pleasant surprise crossed her face. "Teacher." During this period of time, she had stayed somewhere in the Yellow Springs mystic realm. Although it was safe, her heart was filled with anxiety. But now, as soon as she saw Qin Yu, all of her fear and unease scattered away. Yundai knew that in the end her teacher had won. As for how much her teacher had paid to protect her and how many hardships he had experienced, it was easy to guess. Qin Yu grunted. He gestured for her to wait to the side and said, "Your Excellency Divine Seat, I believe you already know some things." "Today, I hope that you can place a saint seal on my disciple's body. Although I can do this, in the end, Your Excellency Divine Seat is the Tao monarch's only spokesperson in the world. Your Excellency's saint seal represents the entire Western tomb. It was only then that Yun Dai reacted. Her eyes swept around, and as she heard Qin Yu's words, she was startled. Western tomb, divine seat? So it turned out that her matters were not over yet? But even she knew what the Western tomb saint seal was. Only the most devout believers of the Western tomb, as well as those who had made great contributions, could be bestowed it. Not only did it represent supreme glory, but it was also a symbol of status. Those who possessed a saint seal were protected by the Western tomb. Even with her teacher's status, wouldn't it be very difficult to obtain such a precious thing? In her chaotic thoughts, Yun Dai ignored Qin Yu's following words. Otherwise, she would have been very surprised. How could her teacher condense a saint seal? But what happened next was far beyond her expectations. The Western tomb divine seat, who was sitting high above, smiled and agreed. Since she is the saint's son's disciple, she naturally has the qualifications to obtain a saint seal. From his tone, it seemed as if he had let out a sigh of relief. Vast amounts of holy light gushed out from nothingness, rapidly condensing into a single point. Finally, it turned into a point of light that fell directly between Yun Dai's eyebrows. A square saint seal the size of a thumb appeared. It was formed from bright, interweaving lines. It itself did not have any meaning, but anyone who saw it could instantly feel the majesty and what contained within it. After regaining her composure, Yun Dai's eyes widened. Saint Sun! When did her teacher become the Western tomb, Saint Sun? Qin Yu smiled and bowed. Thank you, divine seat. Ji Xiangtian said, let's go. I will bring you to see Lady Dorlice. This temple stood apart from the 108 temples. When Qin Yu stepped into the temple, he just happened to meet a pair of bright and beautiful eyes. If you came a few days later, I fear this projection of mine would have dissipated. It seems you were able to keep your composure. Qin Yu cupped his hands together. I don't understand what you mean. Dorlice smiled, but her words were as sharp as knives. The power of holy light in your body, although it comes from the Tao monarch, it is not something he bestowed upon you. The meaning behind her words was terrifying. Qin Yu frowned. He looked up at the beautiful woman in front of him and slowly said, What advice does Lady Dorlice have for me? She had seen through his identity, but hadn't exposed it. Instead, she had helped him cover it up. There must be a reason for this. Dorlice snapped her fingers, and a weak fluctuation swept out. Qin Yu's frown deepened. Don't be nervous. This is only a small method to isolate us from prying eyes. You don't want our conversation to be watched by others, right? Qin Yu said, Please speak frankly. Dorlice's smile faded. It's very simple. I hope to make a deal with you. As for whether or not you are interested, you can listen first. She walked in front of Qin Yu. Her tall figure caused Qin Yu to lower his head a little. He could see the creamy white skin of her chest, unfathomably deep. A light fragrance filled his nose and mouth. It was soft and refreshing, but it also carried with it a strength that could stir up one's heart. Qin Yu's heart skipped a beat. His feet moved a little before he stopped, and he looked straight into her eyes. But some of his small movements couldn't escape Dorlice's eyes. This absolute powerhouse who had descended through her projection began to smile even more brilliantly. I think there must be some confusion in your heart right now. Why does the existence that lent you his strength value you so much? Or, to be more precise, why does that existence want to drag you down when it can resurrect itself? Qin Yu's eyes brightened, like an exploding light in a dark room. He stared at Dorlice in front of him, trying to see what emotions she was hiding in her heart. But without surprise, Qin Yu didn't gain anything. He couldn't judge whether she was probing him or whether she really knew something. Lady Dorlice, as I said before, your projection will soon dissipate. So, if you are truly sincere, then let's get to the point. Doralis's smile froze for a moment. A look of appreciation appeared in her eyes. For you to be able to maintain your composure even at this moment, I feel much more confident in our cooperation. She snapped her fingers. In order to express my sincerity, I will first state my demands and position. As you can see, I am attached to His Excellency Tao Monarch. In other words, I am the god that West Tomb spoke of. Although this isn't the truth, it is very troublesome to explain. You can think of it that way for now. You should already know that a long time ago in this world, there was a battle between two super powerhouses. Although the result was that the one behind you was defeated, His Excellency Tao Monarch was also severely injured. Moreover, that one left behind a contingency plan in his body, causing a great problem for His Excellency Tao Monarch. His Excellency Tao Monarch is still alive, but he has fallen into an endless slumber. He might awaken and return, but he might also dissipate forever in his slumber. As an ambitious woman, I hope to replace His Excellency Tao Monarch's position. So, for me, his eternal slumber or even his disappearance is the best result. I cannot explain the specifics for now, but if that one behind you resurrects, there is a high chance that His Excellency Tao Monarch will also awaken. This is in conflict with my interests. Now, you should understand my position. Qin Yu's thoughts raced. He slowly nodded. Very good. I like to make deals with smart people. It saves me time and effort. Dorlis brightly smiled. Then, let's talk about your problem. About that one behind you, it is best not to mention his name or even his race code. Once one reaches their boundary, it is likely that they will directly sense him and cause my little shielding methods to fail. Now that I think about it, in that great war of the past, the defeat of that existence behind you was likely a scheme from start to finish. Through his death, he avoided the calamity of his race. You should know this, right? Seeing Qin Yu nod, Dorlis continued to speak, her face full of praise and admiration. Perhaps someone as wise and powerful as His Excellency Tao Monarch didn't discover that he was being used from start to finish. That existence played an exquisite, cicada shedding its carapace and borrowed His Excellency Tao Monarch's hand to safely survive until now. In fact, that existence has already taken a step forward and begun to steal His Excellency Tao Monarch's great Tao. Of course, that existence's most exquisite preparations were made by you. I still don't know what method he used to calculate your arrival, but it is clear that he was already prepared. Thus, even though that existence could have resurrected, he was still waiting until you arrived. Dorlis moved even closer. Qin, you could clearly feel the warm breath she exhaled from her nose and mouth. A soft whisper echoed in his ears. Because that existence is waiting for a perfect mortal body that can allow him to transform and take another step forward, and his goal is you. A chill gushed out from the depths of his heart, instantly sweeping through his entire body. Qin Yu stiffened. Although this was only Doralis's side of the story, the fear and unease that had always existed in his heart caused Qin Yu to believe most of it. And besides that, there was another small detail. From the very start, the ancient never asked for Qin Yu's name. Perhaps he didn't care, or perhaps things like names were meaningless in the eyes of the ancient. Or perhaps in his eyes, Qin Yu was only the only descendant of the ancient race left in this world. Besides that, there was no need to attach any symbol to his name, but in Qin Yu's eyes, this represented a kind of disregard. Dorlis moved forwards a bit more. From afar, it gave off the feeling that she and Qin Yu were a pair of intimate lovers hugging each other. It looks like you've already realized something. You really are a smart little fellow. You've helped me save a great deal of time explaining. Then, do you want to accept my deal now? Qin Yu was expressionless. At such a close distance, he could even feel the soft rubbing against his chest. But his eyes remained calm, without the slightest ripple of emotion. Why should I believe you? Dorlis smiled. Because you have no other choice. Her tone was light and confident. I believe you have already discovered that ever since you met that existence behind you, you have become a puppet with a mind of its own. Even though you feel fear, you don't dare to reveal any of it. And what is even more terrifying is that even though you want to get rid of him, you can't find a chance. You can only follow his will step by step. And in this world, I am the only one who can help you escape from that existence's shadow and regain your freedom. Qin Yu was silent for an even longer time. As Dorelis's smile brightened, he suddenly took a step back, putting some distance between them. He lightly said, "You are not human." Dorelis furrowed her eyebrows. Qin Yu continued to say, "You are only a projection that has crossed countless spaces and arrived from trillions of miles away. To be more accurate, you are a projection that has exhausted all of your strength and could dissipate at any moment. Even if everything you say is true, you cannot help me in your current state." His tone changed. "Moreover, I admit that everything you said is likely true, but there is a possibility that you are deceiving me. After all, you are the Tao monarch's follower, and I am a descendant of that existence. Relatively speaking, my relationship with that existence is much closer. And for the time being, it seems that he has no intention of plotting against me. Instead, he has helped me a great deal." Dorelis lightly said, "What do you want?" Chapter 794. Dorelis's eyebrows relaxed, and she revealed a seductive smile. "You finally believed my words." She approached Qin Yu once more. As he was about to retreat, she tugged at his clothes. "You're not even taking advantage of me? Little fellow, has your abilities degenerated? Don't move. These words can only be spoken in my ear. Otherwise, it's likely I'll be detected. Otherwise, do you really think that someone as cold and aloof as this big sister would take the initiative to stick to you?" Qin Yu was expressionless. "If I call you big sister, I fear I'll mess up our seniority," respected Lady Dorelis. Dorelis clenched her teeth and her chest heaved up and down. "You want to anger me and make me reveal my true feelings? Little fellow, your methods are far too naive for me." Qin Yu lowered his head. Their gazes met and his voice was calm. "What I said is the truth." "You're ruthless." Dorelis took a deep breath and the smile on her face completely vanished. She hatefully said, "I will prove it to you, but remember what happened today. In the desert world, you obtained an ancient's heart. If I'm right, it should still be with you. I have a way for you to truly obtain its strength." Qin Yu coldly said, "This is your proof? Even if you can do this, that person won't just stand by and watch. I really suspect that you are trying to sow discord between us so that you can continue working for the Tao monarch." Dorelis said, "Don't worry. Since I said this, I naturally have confidence I can hide it from the senses of that person behind you." She moved even closer and wrapped her arms around Qin Yu's neck. "Relax. If possible, I also don't want to get close to a hateful brat like you. What happens next will directly involve that person, so we have to be more careful." Her voice was low, and her soft and moist breath brushed against Qin Yu's earlobes. His nose and mouth were filled with a faint sweet scent. Qin Yu suddenly discovered that his heartbeat began to accelerate. Some random thoughts uncontrollably gushed out from his heart, causing his breathing to become heavy. Dorelis chuckled. She blew into Qin Yu's ear. "Little fellow, I take back what I said before. You don't seem too honest. All right, let's get down to business. The person behind you is extremely ambitious. Not only does he want to use you, Tao Lord, to escape, but he also wants to seize your Tao Lord's Tao. The power of holy light in your body was bestowed by that person, so you should know this. And what I'm going to use is a portion of the Tao Lord's grand Tao that he has already acquired. Don't look at me like that. I'm an ambitious woman, and I've been quietly making my moves during the years that the Tao Lord has been asleep. Thus, even though I'm far inferior to that person behind you in terms of absolute power, it shouldn't be too hard for me to use the portion of the grand Tao I control to scheme against him." Qin Yu was silent for several breaths of time. How confident are you? 60%. Dorlice said, believe me, this probability is already very high. There is no such thing as a free harvest in this world, right? If you want to obtain it, you will have to take some risks, and compared to what you can obtain, these risks are not high. Humph. If I fail, I'll probably die. Is the risk very low? Dorelice's eyes flashed. There is a way to increase the chances of success if you are willing to help me. Qin Yu lightly said, speak. When you came to the Western Tomb today, you brought a woman with you. Coincidentally, her body is very compatible with mine. Dorlice smiled. If you are willing to temporarily let me borrow this beautiful young lady's body, I have 90% confidence that I can shield you from that person's senses and allow you to truly grasp the ancient's heart. Qin Yu frowned. He never thought that Dorlice would make such a request. There were two reasons why he brought Su Onluen away from Selenda City. One was that half of the giant spirit, bloodline, flowed through this woman's body. After seeing a true giant spirit, Qin Yu wouldn't be wrong about this. The other reason was that Qin Yu had already discovered that Su Onluen had an extremely strong affinity with the power of holy light. Although he didn't know what use this affinity had, he just happened to meet her before he went to the Western Tomb. With a thought, he decided to bring her with him. He never thought that this thought would lead to this place. Seeing Qin Yu remain silent, Dorlice thought for a moment and said, Don't worry, I guarantee that I won't harm her. Moreover, as my projection, she will obtain some benefits. Qin Yu looked up. I agree. Since he saved Su Onluen's life, he would let her repay him with this. An hour later, in Dorelice's subordinate temple, Su Onluen's eyelashes moved as she lay on the ground. She slowly opened her eyes. Faint traces of white, holy light appeared in the air, constantly gathering and fusing into her body. She took a deep breath, and her full chest rose high. Then, she revealed a bright and beautiful smile. This body is more useful than I thought. Holy light lifted her up from the ground. He looked at Qin Yu and faintly smiled. Little boy, I didn't expect you to be such a good person who knows how to take care of women. It was clear that after borrowing Su Onluen's body, she had also obtained her memories. Qin Yu ignored her teasing. When can you make your move? I'm not in a hurry. Dorlice smiled. With this body, my projection strength can be replenished. The more preparations I make, the greater my chances of success will be. Don't worry, I won't burn the bridge after crossing the river. You also don't want to take unnecessary risks, right? 3 days, at most 3 days from now, I can help you control it. It seemed that what this woman said before, that some words could only be spoken in his ear, wasn't complete nonsense. Qin Yu turned and walked away. I will come back in 3 days. Wait, a fragrant wind blew past him. Dorlice drew close to Qin Yu and hugged him. This time, it wasn't an illusory projection. Rather, it was a mature and voluptuous woman's body that exuded an astonishing sensation. Little fellow, before you leave this place, Big Sister needs to stamp a seal on you so that no one can trace what happened here. Faint traces of holy light gushed out from Dorelice's body, condensing into a faint rune that fell between Qin Yu's eyebrows before vanishing from sight. With a tired expression, Dorlice drew back. It's done. Qin Yu sensed it. Through the holy light in his body, he could clearly feel that this rune wasn't harmful at all. It was only concealing some of his aura. Teacher, are you all right? Yundai hurried over. As she approached Qin Yu, there was a trace of worry on her face. There was also a trace of sadness in her eyes. Qin Yu was thinking about Dorlice, so he didn't notice this. He nodded and said, I'm fine. Let's go. Since they were going to stay in the Western Tomb for several days, they had to negotiate with Ji Xiangtian to prevent this Western Tomb, divine, throne from thinking too much and causing unnecessary trouble. Yes. Following behind, Yundai looked at her teacher's back. A sweet scent lingered in her nose. This was the fragrance of a woman, and this scent was exactly the same as that of the woman who had been called into the hall just now. "Teacher, how could you be like this? I was clearly the one who did it first. This is too excessive." Yundai looked down at herself. Although she wasn't as big as that woman, her size was still considerable. Why did teacher take a liking to her? No, I can't watch helplessly as teacher is stolen away. Since teacher isn't truly uninterested in women, I still have a chance. Yundai clenched her teeth and made a decision. The negotiation with Ji Xiangtian went smoothly. Perhaps because Ji Xiangtian thought it would be easier to control Qinyu, he asked the Western Tomb Divine Throne to stay for several days. Of course, Qinyu didn't live in the Saint Sun's divine palace. Rather, he chose a remote and quiet temple as his temporary residence. To this day, his existence was still a secret to most people in the Western Tomb. Thinking about it, Ji Xiangtian should be satisfied with his tactfulness. Night fell. A coolly dressed Yundai knocked on her teacher's door. After a moment, with a series of violent coughs, she was pushed out the door. Pa! Looking at the closed door, Yundai's flushed face was filled with an unyielding will. She gripped her fists and thought to herself, "Teacher, I will not give up." As Qinyu was bitterly smiling in his room, having a headache over his disciple's strange thoughts, a team passed through a transmission gate and entered the Western Tomb. Although Ji Yun repeatedly said that there was no need to be too formal, the Shadow Clan still flashed their banners and went to the Divine Palace in accordance with the rules. In the long line of people in a gorgeous carriage, Zhou wore a long dress embroidered with dragons. Her hair was tied up in a bun, and she looked straight ahead. Her aura was formidable, like that of an empress. She came with the greatest sincerity of the Shadow Clan, hoping to form an alliance with the Western Tomb. As for a common goal, Jian had already vaguely told him that the mystic realm that Qinyu entered contained a great secret of the Western Tomb. If so, then Ning Qin, who was behind all of this, would definitely become an enemy of the Western Tomb. This was already enough. Qinyu began to cultivate. According to Dorlice, he needed to adjust his condition to its peak before he could control the ancient's heart. He couldn't allow any accidents to occur. Although Qinyu didn't trust this woman too much, there was one thing she was right about. He had no other choice: to believe in her or to be manipulated by the ancient. Qinyu would certainly choose the former. 3 days later, he would attempt to take the first step and control the strength of the ancient's heart. He hoped that there wouldn't be any accidents on this step. As he entered a deep meditative state and began to cultivate the silent purple moon in his soul space that had been, because of the arrival of the ancients, consciousness began to shine. In the next moment, 3 figures appeared in a space where a purple moon hung high in the sky. "This is Big Sister Purple Moon's domain?" Mei curiously asked. The woman formed by the blue sun revealed her true appearance for the first time. Her figure and appearance were extremely similar to Purple Moon's. Without expression, she lightly said, "Purple Moon, what do you want to do?" Purple Moon lowered her head. "I don't trust that woman Dorlice, including every single word she says." She looked at the blue sun. "I know that you don't want to interfere in such a dangerous matter, but even if you and I can be reborn after we leave Qinyu, how many chances do you think we will have to truly escape the shackles of the River of Time?" The blue sun said in a low voice, "You should understand that if we do anything, our auras will be sensed. The consequences will be hard to predict." Purple Moon said, "I have already thought this through." She looked up at the purple moon in the skies. Dorelice's words are correct. There are no gains in this world for free. If you want to obtain something, you must first pay the price. If we choose to retreat at this time, then what reason does Qinyu have to help us return in the future? You should know that this is not an easy matter. The blue sun fell silent. After a long time, she slowly said, "I will believe you this once." Mei blinked her eyes again and again. "Big sisters, what are you talking about?" Purple Moon gently smiled. There are far too many things that a child doesn't understand. You just need to remember to follow us and do this together. You really can't do without this. After all, out of the three of them, only Mei Mei had a true body. After the ancient race's consciousness arrived, the three Qin family beauties had fallen silent. After a long period of silence, they finally decided to make their move. This time, they decided to play a big game. If they lost, they would have to return to where they came from. But if they won, their harvests would be astonishing. The Shadow Clan's short meeting with the Divine Seat ended. It was unknown where some well-informed people found out about the relationship between the Shadow Clan Saintess and the young master. The Western Tomb Internal Affairs Division didn't dare to be careless. They had already arranged a suitable residence. Your Highness Saintess, we have prepared a total of 3 residences. This is the mark on the map. You can choose the one you like. Of course, if your Highness isn't satisfied, you can also choose another place. The Internal Affairs Division's divine official respectfully said. Jolie nodded. I'll have to trouble you. She looked at the map that the other party presented her and pointed. This place. The Internal Affairs Division's divine official swept his eyes around. It was a relatively large and somewhat remote divine palace. He thought that this Shadow Clan Saintess seemed to like peace and quiet. If so, then the Internal Affairs Division's future arrangements would need to be changed. The divine official calmly gestured. Your Highness Saintess and the other Shadow Clan guests, please follow me. The young master had already obtained the approval of everyone in the Western Tomb. In the future, he would inherit the great position of the Divine Seat and wield unsurpassed authority within the Western Tomb. Without accident, the woman he loved would also become the future Supreme Godmother. Naturally, no one dared to underestimate her. After smoothly moving in, the people of the Western Tomb gave some simple instructions and then bid their farewells. Zhou Li entered the inner temple. After freshening up, she took off her magnificent and dignified dragon dress and put on a plain set of loose clothes. She leaned against the railing and looked into the distance. Layers upon layers of divine palaces seemed endless. This was the Western Tomb. It was known as the most powerful influence in the world. It ruled endless territories and had hundreds of millions of devout believers. Seeing it today, it truly lived up to its reputation. Moreover, the divine seat was unfathomably deep. Even with her current boundary, she couldn't sense his depths at all. He was truly worthy of being ranked as one of the strongest powerhouses in the world. If he could make a move, then no matter how strong Ningqin was, he would die without a doubt. But if she wanted to move the divine seat, she feared that wouldn't be easy at all. As she frowned, a figure flashed in the distance. Zhou Li's eyes widened, but when she looked again, she couldn't find him, as if what she saw just now had been nothing but an illusion. Frowning, Zhou Li turned and called for a maid. She whispered some orders. Soon, the Shadow Clan member who went out to inquire reported back. There was indeed an honored guest living in that divine palace. It was rumored that he was some great figure from the Western Tomb. Zhou Li nodded and sent him away. She sighed inwardly. Since he was someone from the Western Tomb, she must have been mistaken. As expected, could it be that even now she still held on to a faint illusion? Zhou Li, you must wake up a bit. Chapter 795. The chief seat of judgment hurried over and bowed in front of the main god's palace. Great God, why did you summon me here? Ji Xiangtian's tone was light. Judgment, you participated in the pursuit of the Dragon City Master. I presume you already know that my church's new holy son has arrived in the Western Tomb today. The chief judge nodded. Yes. Ji Xiangtian said, the new saint has a mysterious background. Even though he has been acknowledged by the Tao Lord, I still feel uneasy. The chief seat of judgment frowned. What do you mean? As the Lord Taoist spokesperson in the world, I will never allow his glory to be tarnished. Therefore, we must find out the son of saint's background as soon as possible. Ji Xiangtian raised his head. Therefore, I need you to do something about this matter. The chief judge nodded solemnly. Okay. As a devout fanatic, he did not doubt the words of the great divine priest at all. Thus, on the next day, Qin Yu, who was in seclusion adjusting his condition, had no choice but to come out and greet the divine priest of judgment. Your Highness, we parted in a hurry that day. This old man still has to apologize when we meet again today. I hope that your Highness will not take it to heart. Qin Yu smiled. First seat, you speak too seriously. On that day, my status wasn't clear. Everything you did was correct from the standpoint of the divine religion. The chief judge smiled. The saint is magnanimous. I can rest assured now. After chatting for a while longer, the chief judge stood up and bid his farewells. With his status, Qin Yu had to see him off. At the entrance of the temple, the judgment divine priest stopped. Saint Sun, please wait. I will be leaving first. At this moment, the sound of footsteps came from the other end of the divine palace's passageway. Behind the god priest who was leading the way, Zhou Li, dressed in splendid attire, walked over. Out of the corner of her eye, her heart skipped a beat as she looked up. Qin Yu's complexion changed. He never thought he would meet her in the western tomb. Why was Zhou Li here? His thoughts turned quickly, but his tone did not change. Take care, Chief. He bowed and turned around. The chief judge looked at Zhou Li and nodded. You must be the Shadow Clan Saintess Zhou Li, right? I am the West Hill adjudicator. Zhou Li snapped out of his daze and hurriedly bowed. The chief judge had already left. Under the urging of the red-clothed divine official, Zhou Li continued to follow behind. Today, she had been invited by the Western Tomb Divine Seat to peruse some non-secret Western Tomb scriptures. Originally, she had been thinking about how to persuade the Divine Seats to join forces. But now all of her preparations had been shattered by this sudden meeting, like a flood. Alive, he was still alive. Even though it was just a glance, Zhou Li was sure that he wasn't mistaken. The person who bid farewell to the chief judge was Qin Yu. Zhou Li's emotions surged like the waves on a large lake. She took a deep breath and held back the tears in her eyes. But immediately, another thought appeared in his mind. Why was Qin Yu in the Western Tomb? And from what she saw just now, even the dignified Chief of Judgment seemed to be very polite to him. Thinking of Qin Yu's previous misdeeds, Zhou Li's heart tightened. Could it be that this time he had placed his sights on the Western Tomb Divine Church? He took a deep breath and suppressed his tumbling thoughts. Zhou Li braced himself and followed the red-robed priest into the Western Hill Church's Divinity Department. Luckily, the Divine Seat had other important matters to attend to on this day, so he had to leave midway. Because of this, he had ended the arrangements to study the scriptures ahead of time. Otherwise, Zhou Li wasn't sure whether or not she would have been discovered by the Divine Seat's penetrating gaze. She hurried back to the Divine Palace where she lived. She stood in front of the railing and looked at the Divine Palace that Qin Yu had returned to today. After a long time, there was still no movement. Zhou Li clenched her teeth. Indeed, he was still the same. Just like in Dragon City, he would hide when something happened. Qin Yu sat on a comfortable sofa within the Divine Palace. When he heard the commotion outside, he couldn't help but bitterly smile. He really couldn't avoid it. He looked up and said, Yun Dai, go out and pick up someone. Don't ask too much. Yun Dai had already noticed that her teacher's condition wasn't right today. After the chief judge left, he seemed to be waiting. In the Western Tomb, did her teacher know someone else? Moreover, this person's status wasn't low at all. Filled with curiosity, she arrived outside the Divine Palace. Sure enough, she ran into someone who wore the same black robes as her teacher. And this petite figure, it was a woman. Yun Dai's eyes sharpened, and she unconsciously revealed a bit of sharpness. In her opinion, any female that tried to approach her teacher could be an enemy. Moreover, this was a woman that needed her teacher to specifically wait for. However, She didn't dare to disobey her teacher's orders. She looked around and said, "Come in with me." Zhou Li's heart stirred. Although she already knew it was him, she still couldn't help but feel a bit nervous before meeting him. She took a deep breath. What am I nervous about? If anyone should be afraid, it should be him. I am the dignified saintess of the Shadow Clan, the envoy of the Dragon Clan, an honorable guest of the Western Tomb. I'm not like some people. Once their identity is exposed, their fates will be miserable. Thinking of this, Zhou Li was filled with confidence. She followed behind him into the temple. She swept her eyes around and saw Qin Yu sitting on the sofa. His calm and unmoving posture nearly caused Zhou Li to explode with anger. Where did he think this was? Who did he think he was? The Western Tomb. The Grand Western Tomb, one of the world's most powerful influences. It was even more formidable than the 7 great sects combined. He actually dared to come here to swindle others. Did he really think he wouldn't die? Fine, even if his luck was good. There would always be a time when luck was unreliable. What would he do at that time? Thus, Zhou Li stood in front of him, silent. But beneath her black robes, her eyes were fierce and aggressive, as if she wanted to exterminate him. "Cough, you came in truth. You shouldn't have come." Qin Yu inexplicably felt a bit guilty. Zhou Li coldly sneered. "Ha! Are you afraid that if I come to see you, others will discover you and find a flaw in your disguise?" She clenched her teeth and roared. "Qin Yu, you are becoming more and more promising. You actually came to the Western Tomb to stir up trouble." As she thought about how she had worried and cried for him these past days, Zhou Li gnashed her teeth in hatred. Yun Dai. This voice, it was very familiar. Then Zhou Li tore off her hood. She blinked and decisively shut her mouth. This woman called Zhou Li had a deep relationship with her teacher. It was best not to meddle in their matters. Of course. What reassured Yun Dai even more was that, according to her observations, her teacher didn't have any designs on Zhou Li. In short, this woman wasn't a threat to her. Qin Yu had a tired feeling in his heart. He had been misunderstood time and time again. He began to consider whether or not he should tell Zhou Li everything. Well, although his current identity was strictly speaking a swindler in the Western Tomb, he was still a recognized swindler, including the Western Tomb Divine Throne. As long as he didn't take the initiative to stir up trouble, no one would jump out to target him or make things difficult for him. Why was it that in Zhou Li's eyes he was running back and forth on a tightrope? If he wasn't careful, he would be smashed to pieces. And what made Qin Yu most tired was that no matter where he went, he would always encounter Zhou Li. Couldn't they just honestly separate and never see each other again? Forget each other in the pugilistic world. This sort of fate was a sin. At this time, Qin Yu's silence fell into Zhou Li's eyes. She had poked at his sore spot, but what use was that? How many times had this happened? This was already the 3rd time she had encountered him. He simply refused to repent. If this continued, sooner or later something would happen. It wasn't easy for him to resurrect from the dead. Zhou Li didn't want to see him die with her own eyes. She clenched her teeth and sneered again and again. "I'll give you 2 choices. Hurry up and find an excuse to leave the Western Tomb and return to Dragon City with me. Otherwise, I will immediately expose your identity. I guarantee that I will do what I say. Tomorrow, I want to see you in action. Otherwise, you will have to bear the consequences." As she spoke, she pulled up her hood. Taking advantage of the chaos outside, Zhou Li turned and left. With her current status and strength, she no longer feared making enemies. If that Ning Qin behind her wasn't satisfied, then he could jump out and look for her. But this time, no matter what, she had to rescue Qin Yu. Yun Dai was stunned. After a moment, she said, "Teacher, Zhou Li seems to be serious?" Qin Yu forced a smile. "I know." He rubbed his temples, wondering when she would be able to change her bad habit of being overly enthusiastic. Seeing everything go smoothly was like a stone falling from the heavens. Moreover, Qin Yu was currently in trouble, and he didn't want to implicate Zhou Li. Chapter 796. Main Divine Temple. The red-clothed divine officer respectfully bowed. Divine Lord, we have followed your will. We discovered that the Shadow Clan Saintess took advantage of the chaos to enter the divine palace. She stayed there for some time before leaving. Indeed, his speculation was correct. This mysterious saint's son had a close relationship with the Shadow Clan Saintess. Ji Xiangtian's eyes brightened. After several breaths of thought, he waved his hand. The red-clothed divine officer bowed and drew back. He stood up and paced back and forth in the grand divine temple. After a moment, he looked up and said in a soft voice, "It seems that she really doesn't know your identity. Is this to prevent her from falling into trouble? But as the Western Tomb Saint's son, an existence that stands above all but one, how could she be so low-key? Let me help you." The next day, Qin Yu received an invitation from the divine Lord in the divine palace. He followed the red-clothed divine officer and arrived at a massive temple. As he saw the dense crowd of people from the divine church, he realized that today was a very important sacrificial ceremony of the Western Tomb. Ji Xiangtian was cautious by nature and was filled with dread towards him. He wished that no one in the entire Western Tomb knew of the existence of the saint's son. So how could he publicly appear on such an occasion? Although he couldn't figure it out, since he had already arrived, Qin Yu calmly stood still. It was just that he wore black robes, and as he stood amongst the many divine church officials, he was indeed eye-catching. He attracted many surprised and hesitant gazes. Not long after, with Ji Xiangtian in the lead, the high-level figures of the divine church arrived. Several saints and cardinal bishops glanced at Qin Yu. Although they didn't linger, it was clear that with their status, they already knew of his existence. Seeing Qin Yu, Ji Xiangtian only nodded, not saying a single word. This old fox was truly shameless. He had actually used this method to avoid introducing his identity. The sacrificial ceremony began. Although he had only started halfway, for better or worse, he had obtained the baptism of holy light and naturally grasped some basic knowledge of the Western Tomb. Thus, Qin Yu soon understood the purpose of today's sacrificial ceremony. It was to commemorate the first time that the Tao monarchs will descended into this world and developed his first batch of believers. At that time, this world should have still been under the control of the ancient. Since the Tao monarch's first batch of believers had survived and even passed down his teachings, then the Tao monarch should have been a stowaway. Otherwise, with the ancient's temper, they would never have allowed him to mess around in their territory. Qin Yu's mind raced with all sorts of thoughts as he subconsciously recited along. This was an excerpt from an unclassified scripture. It expressed praise and respect for the Tao monarch. Almost all believers in the Western Tomb could recite it backwards, and when they paid their respects, they would recite it several times. Even if it was just an ordinary piece of text, with a large number of high-ranking priests gathered together, as well as the divine thrones, saints, and cardinals taking the lead, it still produced an incredible change. A great amount of holy light surged out of the void, condensing into many huge shadows in this massive divine palace. They all knelt on the ground devoutly, expressing their utmost respect. Gradually, the chanting that reverberated in the hall became uniform. A sacred and majestic aura surged and reverberated continuously. Ji Xiangtian had a pious expression. He wore the robes of a divine throne and held the Western Tomb scepter in his hand, perfectly playing the role of the Tao monarch's spokesperson in the world. Gradually, holy light began to gather around his body. This was the Tao monarch's will, a gift to the most devout believers. With Ji Xiangtian's cultivation, this level of holy light was basically useless to him, no matter how many there were. But this was still a symbol of his status. As the great divine priest of West Hill, he was like a sun that illuminated the world at this moment, and the saints, cardinals, and great priests around him were like stars that surrounded him. The eyes of countless priests gathered, revealing respect and yearning. Beneath the illumination of the holy light, feelings of submission and awe gushed out from the depths of their hearts. The grand priests continued to move outwards. The ordinary priests also began to gather holy light around them, but most of them were only a thin layer. In the current main hall, it was like a firefly under the brilliance of the Milky Way, not the least bit eye-catching. At this time, Ji Xiangtian, who was wrapped in a great deal of holy light, suddenly opened his eyes. His gaze inadvertently swept downwards, because at this time the range of the gift of holy light had expanded to the edge of the divine palace, where Qin was. The orderly, grand, and dignified sounds of prayer spread out through a special array, enveloping the entire western tomb, divine palace. Looking at the endless holy light sprinkling down from the heavens above, the devout believers surrounding the divine palace knelt to the ground and chanted along with the surrounding divine officials. The red-robed divine official leading the way had changed from his previous calm and composed appearance. His pale face was flushed with excitement, and his eyes were filled with fanaticism. It seemed that if he wasn't in charge of leading the way, he would be kneeling on the ground right now. He quickly took 2 steps forward, his voice filled with pride and urgency. "We came a bit late. The divine throne and the others have already finished their prayers and will soon begin the gift of holy light. Honored guests of the Shadow Clan, please hurry up." Zhou Li furrowed her eyebrows. She had no interest in the so-called Western Tomb sacrifice. There was only one thought in her mind. Even now, Qin hadn't made a move. Did he really think that she didn't dare to expose him? If he really thought this, Zhou Li sneered inwardly. This time, she wouldn't be lenient. She would completely put an end to his suicidal actions. Finally, the great sacrificial ceremony arrived. As special guests, although they couldn't enter the main hall, they could still clearly see what was going on from the outside. Besides the Shadow Clan, there were also some people present. Zhou Li glanced around, looking away. Right now, she couldn't raise her spirits for anything else. But at this time, her eyes suddenly widened. This was because in the prayer hall, amongst the red-robed divine officials, there was a black that was extremely conspicuous. Why was Qin here? What did he want to do? Zhou Li's thoughts were thrown into chaos. Although she had already prepared for the worst, that clearly didn't include being able to guarantee Qin Yu's safety if his identity was exposed during the great sacrificial ceremony. And it was obvious that today's great sacrificial ceremony was an important event in the Western Tomb. Beneath the black robes, Qin Yu furrowed his eyebrows. He seemed to sense something behind him, and he looked up. Then their gazes met in midair. In the next moment, the holy light in the hall seemed to go crazy. It howled and gathered together. Tiny sacred spirits appeared. They surrounded Qin Yu, constantly cheering and singing. The rich, holy light illuminated the stunned faces of the surrounding divine officials. In the center of the great sacrificial ceremony, the divine Lord stood at the main altar. Although he was already mentally prepared, he still gripped the Western Tomb scepter with blue veins bulging out. He never thought that even with the support of the main altar, he would only be able to share the limelight with Qin Yu. If their positions were switched, he originally wanted to use today's great sacrificial ceremony to suppress the threat that Qin Yu posed, but now he had picked up a stone and smashed it on his own foot. Feeling the gazes of the saints and cardinal bishops gathering on him, Ji Xiangtian took a deep breath and suppressed all the fluctuations in his heart. But at this time a new change occurred. The holy light around Qin Yu began to burn like flames. Space twisted, and a figure wearing golden armor with 12 pairs of wings on her back appeared. She held a long sword in her hand and knelt on the ground as she appeared in front of Qin Yu. At this moment, the entire temple fell deathly silent. Even the sound of breathing completely disappeared. Dorlis, one of the most powerful gods under the command of the Holy Monarch. She was a legendary existence that everyone in the Western Tomb Divine Church was familiar with. But now her projection had actually appeared, and she was kneeling in front of this unknown black-robed man. And in the legends, the prideful Lady Dorlis would only kneel to the Tao Monarch, as well as a spokesperson in the world, so the impact of this scene could be imagined. Even though the saints and cardinals already knew of the situation, they still felt their hearts shake. Ji Xiangtian's complexion paled. Outside the divine palace, Zhou Li's eyes widened and her mouth hung open. Her face was filled with disbelief. Just now, she had already determined that the person she saw was Qin Yu. In other words, the one standing in the divine palace, the one receiving the attention of everyone was him. But on the way here, the red-clothed divine priest who led the way had already excitedly told them some things about the sacrificial ceremony and the gift of holy light. The Tao monarch's most devout believer in the world was, of course, their great divine seat. But why was it like this? Just what did Qin Yu do? Even at this moment, she didn't think that Qin Yu had obtained the approval of the holy light because of himself. Zhou Li only habitually believed that Qin Yu was doing something, and that he was doing it during an important sacrificial ceremony of the Western Tomb. Indeed, this Qin Yu person was still walking down the road of death, as always. Moreover, the challenges he faced were becoming increasingly difficult. Did he really not fear death? But soon, with Ji Xiangtian's voice, Zhou Li's habitual thinking was completely shattered. Today, I will take this opportunity to introduce to everyone in the Western Tomb the Holy Sun, His Highness, that has been hidden outside for many years. Ji Xiangtian pointed a finger. His name is Qin Yu. Because of certain reasons, Holy Sun Qin Yu has obtained the approval of Lady Dorlice and is able to exercise a portion of the Holy Monarch's authority. Thus, from this day forth, Holy Sun Qin Yu's status in the Western Tomb is second only to me. He will also be given the title of God Apostle. Whoosh! All sound faded into the distance. Zhou Li stood there in a daze, as if she had lost her soul. She finally reacted. Everything that had happened had only been her own imagination. Qin Yu wasn't being controlled by anyone, or, to be more precise, he was Ning Qin. So, the reason Qin Yu was able to remain safe and sound time and time again wasn't because of luck, but because he had sufficient strength. At this moment, countless fragmented memories emerged from deep within her mind. She thought back to when she was at Sky Declaring Pavilion, and the strange expression on Feng Qing's face when she mentioned Ning Qin. She thought back to when Yun Dai sent her away and that strange feeling she had. So everyone knew. I was the only one who was kept in the dark. No wonder, Qin, you could sit on the sofa yesterday and maintain a calm and unmoving posture like a mountain. He really had confidence in himself, and there was no need for him to be afraid. In other words, from the moment she met him until now, she had always been alive. She had been like a clown in the lies he had weaved, doing things she believed to be infallible. Chapter 797. Ji Xiangtian achieved his basic goal, which was to expose Qin Yu's identity. But even though he had the support of the chief priest position, he was still suppressed by Qin Yu in the gift of holy light. He had no choice but to take the initiative to help Qin Yu reveal his identity. Afterwards, all the cultivators of the Western Tomb knew that there was a hidden holy son of the divine religion. His name was Qin Yu, and his status was comparable to a divine throne. Yun Dai had long known and was very sure that her teacher was an extremely powerful figure, but she always had the feeling that her bottom line had been refreshed. Without any preparation, he had suddenly become the holy son of West Hill, and even more so, he had been made a divine apostle. Although she didn't know that a divine spirit apostle was comparable to a divine throne, she could feel her teacher's status from the awe and respect in the eyes of the Western Tomb cultivators. Sure enough, my vision is the best. With such a teacher, the pavilion closest to the water enjoys moonlight first. She absolutely couldn't give up. If she succeeded and obtained her teacher's protection, her life would be stable. She could even take revenge for the Ying family's blood feud. Her thoughts raced for a long time. By the time Yun Dai regained her composure, she had already followed Qin Yu back to his dwelling. Thinking about it carefully, she determined that this wasn't a good time to tempt him. Yun Dai spent a great deal of effort to suppress the thought of throwing herself at him. Seeing Qin Yu frown and his expression turn serious, Yundai thought for a moment and said, "Teacher, I seem to have seen Miss Zhou Li outside the offering hall just now." Qin Yu nodded, a cold chill in his heart. First, the chief judge had come to visit him and asked him to meet with Zhou Li. Then the next day was the offering ceremony, and Zhou Li had personally confirmed his identity. How could there be so many coincidences in the world? If there were, then it must be controlled by someone. It seemed that what he worried about had inevitably happened. Ji Xiangtian had confirmed that there was some relationship between him and Zhou Li. Perhaps Zhou Li's arrangements yesterday and her meeting with him were all within the Western Tomb's control. Was this a warning to him? With Ji Xiangtian's cunning methods, since he had already made his move, he must have made follow-up preparations. Seeing Qin Yu remain silent, Yundai said, "Teacher, although I don't know the specific situation, do you need to explain it to Miss Yundai? Otherwise, I'm afraid it would be very difficult for her to accept such a change in identity." From Zhou Li's point of view, a certain person who had always been an absolute weakling in her eyes, someone who needed her protection, had suddenly become an existence high above her, someone who could look down on her. With Zhou Li's proud personality, how could she accept this? She feared she would think that Qin Yu was deliberately playing with her. Yundai said these words out of sympathy, but she also wanted to show Qin Yu that she was mature and steady. Her teacher was so outstanding. If she wanted to be promoted successfully, she had to display her best in all aspects. Of course, Zhou Li wasn't a noob in his teacher's eyes. This was the foundation of everything. Otherwise, it would have been good if he hadn't hit him when he was down. You want me to speak up for you? Dream on. How could Qin Yu know that this docile disciple in front of him had already awakened the ultimate skill of a woman's harem struggle? He waved his hand and said no need. Let her do as she pleases. He really didn't know how to explain things to Zhou Li. Moreover, he was in the Western Tomb. No matter what he did, he couldn't hide it from Ji Xiangtian's eyes. If he went to look for Zhou Li now, that would only increase her importance in Ji Xiangtian's eyes. That wouldn't be a good thing for her. But if he pretended that nothing had happened, then with Zhou Li's personality, wouldn't she gnash her teeth in hatred towards him? Forget it, forget it. If she really was angry and resentful, then she would distance herself from him. That would be better for her. Zhou Li returned to the divine palace where the Shadow Clan lived. She dismissed everyone and sat alone in a dark hall. There wasn't the least bit of light in this pitch-black darkness. Only in this pitch-black darkness, where she couldn't even see her own fingers, would she be able to avoid all eyes. Only then would the sense of shame in her heart slightly dissipate. But even though Zhou Li tried her best to suppress it, those fragmented memories of Qin Yu constantly tumbled through her mind, flashing through her mind again and again. Her memories became increasingly profound. After an unknown period of time, Zhou Li regained her composure. She looked up. Even though the doors and windows were tightly shut, there was still a faint light shining in. The sky had already begun to brighten. But on this night, she didn't receive any explanation. Zhou Li's wooden face became increasingly pale. Before this, she thought that Qin Yu was timid and didn't dare to face her. But now, thinking about it, from the very start, he was simply unwilling to waste time and words. Of course, there were also some thoughts of continuing to watch the play. After all, playing the pig to eat the tiger and hiding the identity of some great figure was always a pleasurable experience. But who would care about her feelings? In particular, as she thought about the feelings that she had been carefully hiding in the depths of her heart, Zhou Li revealed a self-deprecating smile. A maid's voice sounded out from outside the hall. Zhou Li was in a trance. It took her several times to hear that it was the Western Tomb Divine Throne who had sent out an invitation. She slowly stood up and rubbed her face. Then she lowered her head and straightened her dress. She said, "Come in." Her voice was low and hoarse, like that of a traveler who had spent many days in the desert. The maid outside was startled and quickly pushed open the door. Luckily, after washing up, Zhou Li's voice had returned to normal. "Let's go." The red-clothed divine official respectfully waited outside the hall. After bowing to Zhou Li, he turned and gestured. "The divine throne has bestowed a royal carriage. Saintess, please board." From the amazement in his eyes and the envy on his face, it wasn't hard to see that this was a great honor within the Western tomb. But today, Zhou Li's mood wasn't too good. She didn't think too deeply about whether or not there were other meanings behind this. She nodded and stepped forwards. The carriage was lifted up. 108 Western tomb warriors shouted out loud. The majestic, magnificent, and tall carriage was lifted up. Beneath the gazes of countless people, it slowly moved deeper into the Western tomb. The main divine temple was the divine palace controlled by the Western tomb, divine throne. This was where the Tao monarch's statue was placed. In the eyes of all the disciples of the Western tomb, this statue held a supreme and sacred status. Besides a small number of people that had the qualifications to enter the main divine temple, this place was sealed off all year round. It was the cultivation area of the divine throne. But today, the main divine temple was opening for a rare occasion. Great divine officials and above were all granted special permission to enter. Everyone knew that some great event was about to occur in the Western tomb today. The divine temple was quiet. The numerous divine officials were nervous. They didn't know whether or not this great commotion was related to Saint Sun Qinyu. After all, throughout the entire history of the Western tomb, in the last hundreds of thousands of years, there had never been a Saint Sun that had been bestowed the title of Divine Spirit Apostle. Moreover, in terms of obtaining the approval of the Tao monarch, it seemed that His Highness Saint Sun Qinyu was above even the divine throne. Every time the divine officials thought of this, they would feel restless. They always felt that the Western tomb would welcome a great upheaval today. At this time, the carriage arrived from afar. It stepped into the massive square in front of the main divine temple. The silk gauze couldn't completely block their line of sight. The numerous divine officials were able to clearly see the kneeling figure atop the carriage. The Shadow Clan Saintess? Why would she board the carriage and come here? From the corner of their eyes, the divine officials saw the excited young Master Ji Yin suddenly stand up and let out a breath of relief. It seemed that this matter would be decided today. As the Western Tomb's young master and the future successor of the Western Tomb Divine Church, he indeed had the qualifications to open the main divine temple when it came to his marriage and his future godmother. This was good, this was good. What they worried about didn't occur. The heavy atmosphere in the hall quietly changed, and the divine officials revealed relaxed expressions. In the center of the main seat, Ji Xiangtian, who sat beneath the Tao monarch statue, frowned imperceptibly. A cold intent flashed in his eyes. Whether or not Qin Yu truly had the heart to struggle for the authority of the Western tomb, his existence itself was the source of the greatest instability. Calmly suppressing all his thoughts, Ji Xiangtian slowly said, "Ji Yin, go and welcome the saintess into the hall." "Yes, divine throne." Ji Yun bowed. With a single step, his figure landed in the main hall, and he quickly walked out. Although he knew that his father had suddenly agreed to Zhou Li's request to marry him, he didn't care about it. He was sure that he truly loved Zhou Li and was willing to do anything for her. Since his father had spoken and the Western tomb had taken the initiative to ask for her hand in marriage, with such sincerity today, she should agree, right? She would definitely agree. Standing on the high stone steps of the main divine temple, Jian looked at the carriage, slowly coming to a stop. He took a deep breath and landed beside the carriage. With a double meaning, he said, "Zhou Li, I've come to pick you up." "Ji Yin, where is this?" "The Western tomb, main divine temple, the training field of my divine throne." Ji Yun smiled, silently saying these words in his heart. This was also the place where the Western tomb announced important decisions. And today, it involved the two of us. At this time, the Western Tomb divine officials shouted out in the distance, "Saint Sun Qinyu has arrived!" From far to near, one voice after another rang out, "Saint Sun Qinyu has arrived! Saint Sun Qinyu has arrived! Saint Sun Qinyu has arrived!" Their voices echoed in the air, constantly echoing in their ears. Zhou Li stiffened for a moment before she composed herself. She turned to look at the square where a carriage was slowly approaching. He sat on it, still wearing that familiar black robe, his bearing calm and steady. Ji Yin pulled her to the side and bowed. "Greetings, Your Highness Saint Sun." He was the young master of the Western Tomb. In the future, he would wield the authority of the Western Tomb, a position below only one and above everyone else. But facing Qinyu, he had no choice but to bow on his own initiative. Otherwise, in the eyes of the Western Tomb divine officials, it would seem that he didn't know the proper etiquette. This was because this person was an existence that could stand shoulder to shoulder with his father, the current Western Tomb divine throne. Ji Yin was a bit worried that Zhou Li didn't know his identity. He said in a low voice, "This Saint Sun's background is mysterious. Even my father needs to treat him with caution and not forget his etiquette." Zhou Li paused for a moment, then nodded. She glanced at the imperial carriage that was approaching and slowly lowered her head. "You've seen enough of my jokes, and now the riddle has been revealed. Look at me, who once bared my fangs and brandished my claws in front of you, but now I have no choice but to bow my head. Do you feel proud of yourself?" The carriage approached, the carriage passed, and the carriage fell. Qinyu stepped into the main divine temple. From start to finish, his eyes didn't move at all, nor did they linger on Zhou Li. Ji Yin furrowed his eyebrows. He suddenly felt that this Saint Sun's figure was somewhat familiar. Some time ago, he had been in seclusion consolidating his gains from his adventures. Today was the first time he had seen Qinyu. But no matter how he thought about it, he couldn't connect this incomparably weak person to this Qinyu in front of him. Shaking his head, Ji Yin suppressed these thoughts. He said, "Zhou Li, everyone has arrived. Let's go in." He paused for a moment. "Following this, if you find it difficult, you can refuse. I guarantee that the Western Tomb will not make things difficult for the Shadow Clan." As he finished speaking, he turned and walked into the main hall. Behind him, the absent-minded, Zhou Li didn't clearly hear what he had said. She clenched her teeth and followed behind. "Didn't you want to see me in a distressed state? Then I will satisfy you and let you be even more proud of yourself." At this time, Zhou Li's emotions were already completely extreme. But she didn't understand that the more she was like this, the more it showed that she cared. Within the temple, besides Ji Xiangtian, everyone from the Western Tomb stood up and bowed. Even the saints and cardinals bowed on their own initiative. Qinyu returned to bow. He walked to the leftmost position and silently sat down. Ji Xiangtian glanced at him and smiled. "The Saint Sun has arrived. Today, I will publicly announce a matter that I hope to obtain the support of everyone in the Western Tomb." He lifted a hand and pointed at His Highness. "My son Ji Yin has grown up. In accordance with the ancestral calendar, I wish to confer upon him the title of Pope and allow him to inherit the throne of the Western Tomb in the future." The atmosphere in the main hall suddenly became heavy, like a taut bowstring that could snap at any moment. There was a deathly silence. The Ji family had ruled over the Western Tomb for generations. As a direct descendant of the current Ji family, it was natural for him to be conferred the title of Pope. But now there was an additional saint son, Qinyu. Besides the several saints and cardinals, the complexions of the divine officials in the hall changed. They never imagined that the divine seat would be the one to suddenly make a move. If Qinyu expressed any objections, the consequences would be unimaginable. In the seat of honor, Ji Xiangtian had a gentle expression, as if he didn't feel the strange atmosphere in the hall. He smiled and said, "Saint Sun, what do you think of my proposal?" Beneath the black robes, Qinyu's voice was calm. "It should be so. I have no objections." "Ha ha ha, Ji Yin, why haven't you thanked His Highness the Saint Sun?" Otherwise, I fear it wouldn't be so easy to confer upon you the title of Pope today." Ji Xiangtian laughed. He calmly swept his eyes over Qin Yu, frowning inwardly. Could it be that he didn't have any suspicions from the events of 2 days ago? Or did he really not have any interest in the authority of the Western Tomb? "Thank you, Saint Sun." Ji Yun bowed, his face flushing red. He glanced at Zhou Li beside him, his eyes full of vigor and vitality. Although he had long ago been regarded as the successor to the throne of the Western Tomb, as long as it wasn't confirmed, there would be other changes. It had to be known that he wasn't his father's only son. Before this, he was the only one who had been recognized. But after today, since he was conferred the title of Pope, that meant that the throne of the Western Tomb was destined to be his. The divine officials in the hall bowed, congratulating the new Pope. As they glanced at Qin Yu, most of them relaxed, but they were even more puzzled. Could it be that His Highness the Saint Sun really didn't have any other thoughts? It had to be known that his status was comparable to a divine seat. Compared to a proper divine seat, there was still a disparity, and he had the qualifications to fight for it. The Western Tomb had a legacy of hundreds of thousands of years, and the Ji clan was the leader of the Western Tomb. The deceased duo Erma wasn't the only one who was dissatisfied with this or had other plans. Ji Xiangtian smiled. "The grand ceremony of conferring the title of Pope will be held 10 days from now. Today, I have another matter to announce. Ji Yan's age has come. I accept his request and wish to use the position of future godmother of the Western Tomb to ask for the hand of the Shadow Clan Saintess, Zhou Li." He locked onto Qin Yu from the corner of his eyes. As he finished speaking, Qin Yu looked up and their gazes met in midair. But unexpectedly, after a brief moment, Qin Yu looked away as if he were indifferent. Schwa, schwa, countless eyes gathered on him. Zhou Li froze. She looked up in a daze, confirming that what she heard just now wasn't an illusion. To ask for the hand of the Western Tomb, to use the position of godmother, this was an unsurpassed glory. As long as she agreed, her dream of a bright life would be paved. In the future, she would stand at the peak of the world and even have the qualifications to place her hopes on the world and participate in the game of chess. But for some unknown reason, Zhou Li didn't feel any joy at all. Her heart was filled with panic. She subconsciously looked up at Qin Yu. All she could see was his motionless figure sitting there, as if what was happening right now had nothing to do with him. Her heart turned sour and then pain. Zhou Li looked up, trying to maintain her pride. She couldn't cry. She absolutely couldn't cry. Beside her, Ji Yin revealed a nervous expression. He hesitated for a moment and then said in a low voice, "Zhou Li, I truly love you. If you are willing to marry me, Ji Yin can guarantee that in this life I will never have any disloyalty towards you, and I won't allow you to suffer any grievances, of course, if you aren't willing. Ji Yin won't pester you any longer, and I won't harbor any resentment towards you." "I agree," Zhou Li suddenly said. Ji Yin was overjoyed. "What did you say?" Zhou Li looked at him, her voice calm. "I agree." "Ha ha ha." Ji Xiangtian laughed. "Good. Today is a day of double happiness. Spread it out so that all believers in the Western Tomb can celebrate. Saint Sun, I will be holding a banquet to celebrate. Please be sure to attend." His smile was warm and his heart was as bright as snow. Zhou Li's slight change in expression just now couldn't escape his eyes. As he thought, there really was a problem between the two of them. Whether or not Qin Yu had the heart to struggle for the authority of the Western Tomb. Controlling this woman that was related to him was a powerful bargaining chip. Ji Yun cupped his hands together in congratulation. His eyes occasionally fell on Zhou Li, his expression gentle. Beneath the black robes, Qin Yu had a calm expression. He took in all of this and inwardly apologized. Perhaps this Ji Yun truly loved Zhou Li and wanted to spend the rest of his life with her. But his mistake was that he came from the Western Tomb. Although he had joined forces with Dorlice, Qin Yu didn't have much confidence that he could contend with the powerful ancient's will, and his existence meant that the incomparably glorious Western Tomb Divine Church would inevitably welcome its final destruction. No matter what, Qin Yu wouldn't allow Zhou Li to be buried with them. The celebratory banquet smoothly came to an end. Qin Yu returned to the Divine Palace. Yun Dai cautiously asked, "Teacher, you really don't care about this matter?" Although it was said that falling flowers have feelings for each other, her teacher wasn't such a heartless person. Qin Yu sat down. His body sank into a soft killing intent. He lightly said, "Don't worry, I have a way to deal with it." Besides being the Shadow Clan Saintess, Yun Dai also had the status of a dragon envoy. Qin Yu just happened to recognize the existence that gave her the status and could use it. Chapter 798. The Shadow Clan envoy departed from the Western Tomb. Ji Yin stood at the edge of the square, watching as Zhou Li's carriage entered the spatial gate. He couldn't help but bitterly smile. There was a great change within the Shadow Clan, and they urgently summoned the Saintess back to Dragon City. Even if the Western Tomb was enormous, it was impossible for them to say anything about this matter. Luckily, the engagement had been set. Once the Shadow Clan finished dealing with their internal affairs, he could go to Dragon City and bring Zhou Li back to the Western Tomb. At that time, he would give her a glorious wedding. Ji Yin took a deep breath and suppressed his anxious mood. He revealed a look of anticipation. He couldn't wait for that day. Unfortunately, he didn't understand that from the moment Zhou Li left the Western Tomb, she would never return. Or it could be said that when she returned, the Western Tomb would no longer exist. Qin Yu looked away, a smile on his face. Zhou Li had left according to the plan, so it was time for him to do his own things. After instructing Yun Dai to stay in her dwelling and not casually walk around, he went to Dorella's temple and entered. "You're here." Dorli smiled. She occupied Swan Luan's body, her every frown and smile enchanting. As she approached, before she even approached, faint traces of fragrance entered his nostrils. Qin Yu frowned and held his breath. This fragrance was actually able to stir up the dark desires in the depths of his heart. Just a little bit was enough to cause great waves to appear in his calm heart. Sensing the coldness in Qin Yu's eyes, Dorlis waved her hand. "This fragrance is because of this woman. It was only activated by my strength. It has nothing to do with me." She looked at Qin Yu. "Since I've chosen to cooperate with you, you and I should trust each other before our goal is achieved." Qin Yu didn't comment on her words. He directly said, "If you're ready, then let's begin." Dorlis nodded. "Of course. Follow me." The temple was extremely large. After passing through the main hall and a long corridor, the two of them entered a side hall. All of the debris within the hall had been cleared away. Whether it was the floor, the walls, or the ceiling, everything was engraved with runes. However, these runes were in a dark, gray state. It was clear they hadn't been activated yet. Dorlis stood at the entrance, her expression dignified. "This is a support array formation. It needs your blood to activate and then follow my instructions to take out the ancient's heart. Leave the rest to me. Remember, once you start the fusion, no matter how painful the process is, you must not stop. Otherwise, not only will your plan fail, but the person behind you will also notice it. At that time, it will be impossible for you to plot against him." Qin Yu swept his eyes over them. The array formation formed by these runes was strange to him, and he couldn't see what they were used for. After a brief moment of hesitation, he strode into the side hall and arrived at the center of the array formation, where there was clearly an empty space. Zhang Xian raised his hand, and with a thought his palm ruptured. Fresh blood flowed down his fingers and dripped onto the ground. Thus, with Qin Yu as the center, the gray runes were gradually dyed with a layer of blood red. Dorella's eyes revealed a trace of surprise that immediately turned into praise. She originally thought she would have to spend some time persuading him, but this little fellow named Qin Yu could be considered decisive. Putting away her thoughts, her eyes lit up with excitement. To have a chance to plot against this person who played with the Tao monarch in the palm of his hand was truly an exciting matter. Within the side hall, the runes that formed the entire support array formation were so numerous that it was hard to count them all. To completely awaken them required a massive amount of blood. Although Qin Yu's expression was calm, as time passed his complexion gradually paled. An hour later, as Qin Yu was seeing double and feeling incomparably tired, Dorelis's voice echoed in his ears. "Now is the time." Without hesitation, Qin Yu lifted his hand. Light surged, and the ancient's heart appeared in front of him. Currently, it was only the size of a palm. It constantly shrank and expanded, emitting deep thumping sounds. Although these thumps weren't hurried, they were like the roars of thunder in winter, piercing straight into the depths of the soul. It was like every beat contained the strength of 10,000 caddies, representing a powerful will that couldn't be resisted. Dorelis had a solemn expression. She lifted a hand and pointed a finger. "Rise." Within the side hall, all of the activated array formation, runes, suddenly separated from the main hall. They floated in the air, forming the phantom of a giant furnace that covered Qin Yu and the ancient's heart. Then, a massive amount of holy light gushed out from the surrounding space. It gathered from all directions, wrapping around the furnace phantom and burning it. Being burned by the holy light, the temperature seemed to rise. The blood absorbed by the runes rapidly evaporated, forming a massive fog of blood. Thump! Thump! The ancient's heart beat. As it shrank and expanded, faint traces of blood fog were sucked into it. Qin Yu suddenly felt that there was a subtle connection between him and the ancient's heart. Then he roared out in pain. At this moment, Qin Yu felt as if an awakened great beast had broken into his chest. It roared as it rampaged about, wreaking havoc everywhere it went. An intense pain erupted like a volcano, as if his flesh and bones would be torn apart and twisted apart. No matter how tenacious Qin Yu's mind was, he still couldn't withstand it. Dorelis's voice sounded out in his mind. "Hold on, this is only the beginning. As the ancient's heart fuses with you, the pain you will suffer will become increasingly heavy. You and I only have one chance. If we fail, there will be no more." Qin Yu didn't reply, because at this time he could no longer make a single sound. Pain crazily attacked his mind like a tide, as if he would be swallowed up in the next moment. Thump! Thump! The ancient's heart began to beat faster. More and more blood fog was absorbed by it. Then, within Qin Yu's chest, in a place where the naked eye couldn't see, a mass of blood fog began to appear. It constantly expanded and shrank, maintaining the same rhythm as the ancient's heart. Yellow Springs, mystic realm. Beneath the dark skies, the giant skull, quietly laid on the ground, suddenly began to burn with holy light. "It's begun." The ancient's deep voice sounded out. As expected, the junior had already sensed it and had begun to resist. This wasn't unexpected. After all, even though he wasn't a true ancient, he still possessed the most orthodox inheritance of the ancient race. He was already an ancient. As for the bloodline of the ancient race, they were born to support the heavens and earth. Even in the face of endless dangers, they still dared to give it their all. If possible, he didn't want to kill his own people. This was because in this world, in a sense, the only ancient left alive were the two of them, but he had no other choice. This was because the fallen ancient race needed a true powerhouse to pull them out of the quagmire and stand tall in the world once more. And he was the only candidate. Qin Yu was too weak. His future was filled with countless variables, but the future of the ancient race could not allow any accidents to occur. "So, I'm truly sorry, but I have to make a move." As the ancient who had schemed against the Tao monarch and patiently endured for hundreds of thousands of years until now, his abilities and preparations were far greater than Qin Yu and Dorelis imagined. Thus, he knew about fusing with the ancient's heart from the start. But the ancient wouldn't stop him. In fact, if there was an accident, he would even help. This was because what he originally wanted was the body of a true ancient. Not only did he have the body of an ancient, but he could also occupy everything that Qin Yu had. Then, completely fusing his original body with Qin Yu's was certainly the best choice. "It's begun," Purple Moon said. She swept her eyes over Blue Sunday. "Let's prepare." Blue Sun said, "I will ask you one last time. Do you really want to take this risk?" Purple Moon frowned. "If you still have concerns, I can do it myself." Blue Sun shook her head. She lifted a hand and pointed between her eyebrows. In that instant, a brilliant light shined and the phantom of a great blue sun appeared. The light shined brilliantly and a pressure filled the air. The aura of ancient years flowed out from the blue sun, nearly condensing into essence. Purple Moon's heart relaxed. If Blue Sun really went back on her word, then her chances of success would be less than 30% if she tried alone. She looked up at Mimi. "Remember, when my and Blue Sun's strength completely fuses into your body, give up all resistance and hand over control to us. Don't worry. Although there are some risks, no matter what happens, Blue Sun and I will take responsibility. It won't affect you at all." Mimi bitterly muttered, "Big sister, although you speak so seriously and your expression is sincere, my intuition tells me that your words aren't true." Purple Moon paused for a moment. She raised a hand and rubbed her head. "Little girl, intuition and what not are always unreliable." Strength shot out from her palm. Mimi's eyes widened and she slumped to the ground. Blue Sun coldly said, "If you don't knock her out, I will attack." Poor little Mimi. Even now, she didn't know that the two big sisters beside her had already decided to knock her out. Purple Moon revealed an apologetic expression. She shook her head, suppressing her thoughts. "I hope everything goes smoothly." Her figure scattered, turning into a crescent purple moon that resonated with the blue sun. Gradually, the light of the sun and moon intersected and a phantom appeared. This phantom was very tall, like a mountain, but if one looked carefully, they would discover that its surface constantly fluctuated, like the surface of a tumbling lake. Traces of a strange aura emitted from this phantom, but it was imprisoned by the blue sun and purple moon phantoms, unable to truly spread outwards. Dorlice discovered that things were progressing more smoothly than she had imagined. Moreover, what surprised her the most was this little fellow's patience. She had originally prepared some methods to slow him down when he couldn't withstand the pain, but she discovered that she didn't need them at all. Every moment he stood on the edge of collapse, as if he would fall into a trance in the next moment. But he persisted every time. He was like a tumbling doll. This caused Dorlice to appreciate him even more. Of course, although she appreciated him, she didn't plan on helping him. The consumption of strength to descend into this world was astonishing. Every bit of strength was incomparably precious. Every bit she could be saved was saved. Moreover, the more strength she had, the more complete the preparations she left behind would be. This would make it easier to control in the future. That's right, Dorlice had ambitions. She hoped to replace the Tao monarch's position and take his great Tao for herself. But as an ambitious woman, she clearly had to look further into the future. Since there was a chance, she certainly had to plan more for herself. For instance, a powerful ancient race puppet. Although Dorlice hadn't personally participated in that war in the past, she still knew a little about how formidable the ancient race was. The Tao monarch had personally descended and made many preparations ahead of time, but in the end he had only achieved a miserable victory. And what was terrifying was that, based on the information she currently grasped, the Tao monarch's victory was likely a trap set up by the enemy. If she could control an ancient race puppet, it would surely play an astonishing role in the future. Moreover, taking a step back, even if she failed, she wouldn't suffer any losses. Thump! Thump! This was the beating of the ancient's heart. But if one carefully examined it, they would discover that it was two sounds superimposed on each other. One came from the ancient's heart, and the other came from Qin Yu's chest. Now, in his chest that couldn't be seen with the naked eye, beside Qin Yu's own heart, the mass of blood had grown several times in size. It was faintly taking on the shape of a heart. Thick and dense blood vessels spread out, connecting with Qin Yu as one. But if one looked carefully, they would discover that within this heart that hadn't fully formed, there was a silver rune that shined with a faint light. Dorlee smiled. She said in a soft voice, "I've finally finished." Now the dominant position was in her hands. Within the ancient skull that burned with holy light, as the silver rune appeared within Qin Yu's chest and formed a heart, a cold sneer sounded out. How interesting. The ancient originally thought that Dorlee had helped Qin Yu in the hopes of preventing his resurrection. But he never imagined that she had already seized a part of the Tao monarch's great Tao and even dared to secretly attack him. She really had guts, since she had delivered herself to his doorstep on her own initiative. There was no reason to push her away. If he could swallow up Dorlee, then he would be able to seize the Tao monarch's great Tao much earlier. The burning holy light suddenly split apart. It rapidly shrank and condensed, finally forming a rune the size of a knuckle. Hum! With a trembling sound, space fluctuated and the rune sank into it, vanishing from sight. In the next moment, it appeared in Qin Yu's chest and fused into the silver rune that had just formed, causing it to undergo some subtle changes. The ancient bloodline wasn't too good at these little tricks in the dark. But after waiting for hundreds of thousands of years, he had more than enough time to mend his own shortcomings. Thus, the ancient had done an excellent job. Although Dorlee noticed that there was a brief fluctuation in the rune back door she left behind, it immediately vanished. After sensing it for a while and finding nothing wrong, she didn't care too much about it. At this point, the dominant position had changed. The purple moon and blue sun shined upon each other. Wherever their light covered, large swathes of shadows floated about. When Dorlee was secretly playing tricks, they didn't move. When the ancient took advantage of the situation and left behind a trace, they still didn't move. But now, when both sides believed that Qin Yu was in their hands and the fusion of the ancient's heart was about to be completed, the purple moon and blue sun made their move. Ring, ring, ring. The cosmic Sea-Cross bell rang out. Chapter 799. When the cosmic Sea-Cross bell turned into darkness, it was like an eye had opened to look at the world. An extremely strange aura spread out from within it, cold and gloomy, as if it came from some sunless land that could never be illuminated by the light. Within the rapidly forming heart in Qin Yu's chest, on the silver rune that was about to disappear, a black the size of a needle suddenly appeared before vanishing from sight. But because of the appearance of this black, the pain that Qin Yu suffered instantly increased by over 10 times. Ah! He roared out loud. His entire face twisted and dark red blood gushed out from every orifice on his head. His muscles constantly twitched and twitched. Dorella's complexion changed. She didn't think that just as she was about to succeed, such a change would occur. Was it because she had secretly left a back door behind? Without much time to think, Dorlee immediately attacked. She could clearly feel the chaotic strength within Qin Yu's body. This time he really couldn't withstand it. With a step forwards, Dorlee passed through the rune furnace. She lifted a finger and pointed it between Qin Yu's eyebrows. A massive amount of holy light erupted from Dorella's body, rapidly gathering together until her finger turned transparent. One could clearly see the holy light rushing towards Qin Yu like a broken dam. Runes appeared on the surface of Qin Yu's body. These runes were the same as those on the rune furnace. As they appeared, the furnace gently trembled. Shock waves surged out, falling onto Qin Yu's body and being absorbed by him, calming the raging ancient's heart in his chest. Qin Yu's twisted face eased a little. Blood still flowed out from every orifice of his head. He felt as if he were a tree in a storm, about to be snapped in half at any moment. Dorella's complexion was ugly. The strength of her projection was too weak. She had tried her best, but she could only slow down the speed at which Qin collapsed. She couldn't change the final result. At this moment, she felt a bit of regret. She shouldn't have been too greedy. The fusion of the ancient's heart could have succeeded. She had already taken the initiative to place all the blame on her own head. Coincidentally, there was another person who believed that Qin had suddenly fallen into danger because of her. At the very least, it was a large part of it. Compared to Dorlice, the ancient didn't want anything to happen to Qin. Or, to be more direct, he absolutely couldn't allow anything to happen to Qin. Otherwise, wouldn't these hundreds of thousands of years of forbearance be in vain? All the plans and preparations he had made for the future were going to be for naught. So, after determining that Dorlice wasn't enough to help Qin, he didn't hesitate to attack. Of course, he had to be careful when he attacked because he didn't want to expose himself prematurely. Dorlice was prepared, and it wasn't as if the ancient hadn't prepared a backup plan. He had already thought of all sorts of responses. Within Qin chest, his own heart suddenly began to vigorously beat, pushing his blood to wildly rush through his body. An ancient, wild, and ancient power that was filled with the aura of time gushed out from every inch of his body. This was a pure strength that came from the ancient race. It was just that Qin had never been able to completely mobilize or control it. And now, under the control of the ancient's will, this strength was thoroughly activated. Space trembled, and the shadow of a towering mountain appeared, followed by a second and a third. But only the shadow of the first mountain was clear, the second was blurry, and the third only had a faint mark. Even so, as the three mountain shadows appeared, an invisible strength arrived. The boundless strength completely suppressed the collapsing strength within Qin body, and the rampaging ancient's heart was directly suppressed. Dorlice's heart shook. The ancient race's 3 saint mountains. She looked at Qin, her eyes filled with shock as well as a bit of joy and excitement that she couldn't suppress. Dorlice discovered that she seemed to have underestimated this boy Qin's potential. In this life or death moment, he was able to fully awaken the strength of the ancient race and even summon the 3 saint mountains to descend at the same time. It had to be known that this sort of talent was rare even in the entire ancient race. She had profited greatly. As long as Qin didn't die today, his future achievements would be limitless, and the stronger Qin was, the stronger she would be. Indeed, the bolder a person was, the more prosperous they would be. Risks had to be taken. At this time, any regret that Dorlice felt in her heart had already vanished. The ancient also let out a sigh of relief. Although he had attacked in secret and the chances of success were high, what if he had failed? At that time, things would have become much more troublesome. Luckily, that what if didn't happen. The darkness on the surface of the cosmic sea-cross bell rapidly retreated. The fused light of the sun and moon faded away. The purple moon and blue sun were incomparably dim, as if they were on the verge of being extinguished. I hope this was worth it. I am going to sleep now. Take care of yourself. The blue sun faded away as it spoke. Purple moon sucked in a deep breath. She could feel that the strength she had recovered with great difficulty had been completely exhausted. Even part of the vitality she had accumulated was rapidly disintegrating under the backlash. Purple Moon didn't have full confidence that she could survive this calamity, but since she had already done it, there was no reason for her to regret it. Forcefully resisting her weakness and exhaustion, she summoned the last of her strength to transmit a message to Qin. Purple Moon's consciousness fell into darkness. Thump! Thump! Within Qin chest, the fused ancient's heart completely took shape. As it powerfully beat, the ancient's heart outside began to wither away, turning into powder that fell to the ground. Before he could feel just what sort of changes the newly fused ancient's heart brought him, Qin had already fallen asleep a step ahead of Purple Moon. Even with the help of Dorlice and the ancient's consciousness, the entire fusion process was no less than a life or death battle. His mind was already exhausted to the extreme. After an unknown period of time, Qin awoke from his dark and sweet sleep. He immediately received the message that Purple Moon passed to him. It could be summarized into the following points. Dorlice had left behind a back door in the ancient's heart. She believed that she had Qin under her control. The ancient already knew of this matter, but he didn't stop her. He only played some tricks on top of Dorlice's actions. Thus, he believed that the power was in his hands. The Qin clan's 3 beauties had joined forces and paid a price to play the 2 above. Thus, the ancient's heart was now Qin Yu's and only his own. No one else could control it. It was complicated to say, but this was the situation. Sure enough, so-called partners couldn't be relied on. As for the ancient that had patiently waited for Qin Yu to deliver himself to its doorstep for hundreds of thousands of years, it wasn't so easy to scheme against him. If it weren't for the support of the 3 beauties, Qin Yu would have never been able to escape. He thought to himself that he was lucky. He probed further, but didn't obtain any response. Moreover, besides the aura of the cosmic Seacross bell, his connection with Purple Moon and Blue Sun had become extremely weak. Was this the price they said they had to pay? Qin Yu took a deep breath and suppressed his thoughts. Then he slowly opened his eyes. Dorlice was standing in front of him, her smile bright and beautiful. "How do you feel?" Qin Yu replied with a smile and nodded. "Very good. Dorlice, I'll remember this debt for now. We'll slowly settle it later." Qin Yu's smile left Dorlice stunned. She felt a bit guilty and a cold chill crawl up her back. Could he have discovered her? Dorlice hurriedly sensed her connection with the ancient's heart. Everything was normal and she felt a sense of relief. So what if he discovered her? It was already too late. She looked Qin Yu up and down with an incomparably gentle gaze, as if she were looking at her most precious collection. Dorlice's smile became even more gentle. "Don't worry. Your suffering won't be in vain. Rest well first. I'll come back later." As he watched her leave, Qin Yu sneered inwardly. He imagined that someday in the future, this woman's expression would surely be very wonderful. He closed his eyes and began to carefully sense the changes in his body. The 2 hearts in his chest were beating at the same frequency. Every time they contracted and expanded, they pushed his blood to the limit. He could feel faint traces of warmth being released from his blood, fusing into his flesh and blood, constantly tempering and strengthening his mortal body. And most importantly, the newly fused ancient's heart contained an extremely formidable strength. If he wanted to, he could instantly detonate it. A moment later, Qin Yu opened his eyes. A sharp light flashed in them, revealing a bit of joy. Although the process had been thrilling, the harvests were equally amazing. After controlling the ancient's heart, although his strength hadn't increased by too much, his true strength had risen by more than 3 times. This strength that came from the ancient's heart was greatly limited by his current mortal body's intensity, but it was enough to change his situation in a critical moment. Moreover, the ancient's heart was constantly strengthening his mortal body. It might not be obvious in a short period of time, but as time passed, his mortal body would surely reach an extremely tyrannical degree. Qin Yu took a deep breath and suppressed the joy in his heart. He had smoothly taken the first step and even profited from this disaster, but he was far from being able to relax. Disregarding everything else, the ancient had taken the initiative to help Qin Yu fuse with the ancient's heart. It was clear he had his own plans. This was likely only the beginning. This time, with the help of Purple Moon, Blue Sun, and Mimi, Qin Yu was the ultimate winner. But what about next time? Whatever. Thinking about these things was a waste of effort. He would just have to wait and see in the future. The fusion of the ancient's heart came to an end. On the surface, it seemed like everyone was happy. But as for who would have the last laugh, that would be left to time to prove. Qin Yu went into seclusion for half a month. After thoroughly adapting to the ancient's heart, he left and rested for a moment before bidding his farewells to Ji Xiangtian. "Saint Sun, you can stay in the Western Tomb for a few more days. There is no need to be in such a hurry. Ji Xiangtian smiled, sincerely urging him to stay. Qin Yu thought that if he stayed any longer, something would definitely happen to them. Since the ancient hadn't revealed any intentions of attacking the western tomb, Qin Yu naturally wouldn't rush over on his own initiative. He made an excuse that he had some matters he needed to attend to. Seeing Qin Yu's firm attitude, Ji Xiangtian smiled and bid his farewells. He told Qin Yu that if he needed anything, he could send a message to the western tomb. Qin Yu smiled and nodded. Then he turned and left the main temple. Chapter 800. When they left the western tomb, there were only 2 master and disciple. But before long they had become a trio. Dorli stopped Qin Yu and said that she wanted to go with him. The black-robed figure was silent for a moment before nodding in agreement. Of course, this was only a disguise. In fact, Qin Yu already expected that since this woman borrowed Su Onluin's body, she would definitely think of a way to keep him here. Now that Qin Yu had become a puppet under her control, following at his side and helping him plot against the ancient was clearly the best choice. Unfortunately, Dorlis didn't know that everything she did was no longer a secret. She feared that she would cry miserably in the future. Qin Yu remained calm as Dorlis joined him, but Yundai actually felt a great threat. She didn't care whether this woman's consciousness was called Dorlis or Su Onluin. Yundai only knew one thing, and that was that this woman was extremely tempting. Moreover, she seemed to be very close to her teacher. When they occasionally spoke, she always had a flirtatious appearance. What Yundai found most unbearable was that this woman would occasionally glance at her. That was a provocation, a naked provocation. You want to compete with me for teacher? No way. Qin Yu had no intention of interfering in the battle between these 2 women. He was well aware that Dorlis was only playing with Yundai, or perhaps she was trying to numb his senses. Qin Yu was considering where he should go next after leaving the western tomb. The ancient didn't express anything about this. It was clear he needed to make a decision. The reason he joined Sky Declaring Pavilion was to find a chance to heal his wounds. Now that he had recovered, there was no need to return. He seemed to have forgotten something. A moment later, Qin Yu slapped his forehead and finally remembered. There was a sleeping pheasant left in Sky Declaring Pavilion. If he didn't return, there was an 80% chance that fellow would be stewed and eaten. He rubbed his chin. Then he thought of Feng Qing. That smart woman had helped him a little. Destroying the bridge after crossing the river was something that ruined one's character. It was best not to do such a thing. Since he didn't have a goal for the time being, returning to Sky Declaring Pavilion was the same. When Qin Yu decided to return to Sky Declaring Pavilion, Feng Qing was resting in bed. For some unknown reason, she had been feeling tired easily recently. She had tried several methods, but none of them worked. Suddenly, Feng Qing, who was lying on the bed, revealed a look of terror in her sleep. She seemed to have had a nightmare, but she couldn't wake up for a while. After a long time, with a scream, she suddenly opened her eyes and stood up, gasping for breath. Her face was pale. It was this dream again. Over the past 10 years, she had done it countless times, but as time passed, it appeared more and more frequently. In the beginning, it was easy for her to wake up, but now, being in a dream was like being trapped in a swamp. Every time, she had to use all her strength to struggle and escape. Feng Qing had a kind of fear in her heart. She was afraid that one day she would fall into a dream and never wake up again. The cultivation technique that her teacher had taught her could alleviate such a situation, but the moment she stopped cultivating, it would only worsen. As for that cultivation method, Feng Qing had rarely touched it in the past year. This was a secret that she had never told anyone. The cultivation method that her teacher taught her, as her cultivation deepened day by day, was slowly losing control. Feng Qing had asked her teacher about it, and the answer she got was that it was normal. When one passed this stage of cultivation, the loss of control would naturally disappear. At the beginning, Feng Qing believed this, but as the situation became increasingly serious, She couldn't help but doubt it. Then, she discovered more and more things that she couldn't figure out. For instance, everything she said to Chinyu, as well as the increasingly clear giant shadow that stared at her in her dream, causing her to feel fear from the depths of her heart. Calming her breathing, Feng Qing closed her eyes and sensed her own situation. A moment later, she opened them, a look of panic on her face. As she thought, even though she had stopped cultivating, her cultivation method was still revolving on its own. It was just that the speed at which her strength rose had slowed down. Feng Qing didn't know what fate awaited her if things continued like this, but she felt that it wouldn't be something that she looked forward to. She began to miss Chinyu incomparably. This was because, according to the information she had, he was the only one who had the ability to help her. But after Dragon City, Feng Qing had lost all information about Chinyu. It was likely that this temporarily trapped, peerless powerhouse had drifted far away. As for the agreement between them, Feng Qing bitterly smiled. An ant could never have extravagant hopes that a lion would abide by the agreement between them. After all, such a thing as an agreement usually existed between two people on the same level. As Feng Qing was worrying about her gains and losses, and her heart was gradually approaching despair, Grandmaster Ningqin returned after leaving the Mid-Morning City Branch Division for several months. But on this day, she wasn't the only one feeling happy. Mr. Sand, who had been ruthlessly slapped in the face and disgraced by San Liuha, had also returned. After several months, Mr. Sand, who had been trampled to the ground, had already crawled back up. Moreover, he had relied on his formidable strength to establish his dignity once more. Now, as he stood surrounded by people and looked at Chinyu and the two people behind him, Mr. Sand didn't have any expression, but his hands hidden beneath his sleeves couldn't help but shiver. He recognized Yundai. This little girl's aura had become more and more alluring over the past few months. But at this time, most of Mr. Sand's attention was focused on another woman. She looked to be around 27 to 28 years old, and her figure was domineering. Her every frown and every smile was incomparably graceful, and her eyes were like little hooks, extremely alluring. Of course, beauty was beauty. With Mr. Sand's shrewdness, he wouldn't be unable to walk the Tao path just because of her beauty. What left him burning with anxiety and howling in his heart was that this little woman's aura was 10 times, 100 times richer than Yundai's. If he could obtain her, then the hidden dangers in his body could be eliminated, and he wouldn't need to live such a miserable life. As for Chinyu, he didn't place him in his eyes at all. As long as this hidden danger was eliminated and his strength restored, he could crush this brat that humiliated him with a single finger. Mr. Sand, there is no need to worry. Back then, you only made a mistake. If there is another chance, who knows who will be the final winner? That's right. In any case, in my opinion, Mr. Sand is our Mid-Morning City's #1 Beast Trainer Grandmaster. Before long, the Beast Trainer Grand Competition will begin. According to the rules of past years, an internal elimination competition will be held ahead of time. At that time, Mr. Sand will definitely be able to prove himself. The crowd continued to flatter him. Sha Liuha took a deep breath. He lightly said, "I still have some matters to attend to, so I will be leaving first." He turned and left. He had to leave immediately. Otherwise, if he stayed any longer, he feared he wouldn't be able to restrain his impulses, and others would notice something was wrong. But there was one point that Sha Liuha was well aware of. Those two women behind Chinyu, especially the newcomer, he had to obtain them no matter what. No matter the price. At the lakeside building, as Chinyu approached, there was a loud cry. 2 large and small balls of fire hurled towards him at an astonishing speed. Before they even approached, they caused the temperature in the air to rapidly rise. Chinyu stopped, a smile on his face. These were the 2 fire phoenixes. After sensing their master's aura, they had come out to greet him. As they arrived beside Chinyu, they rapidly shrank in size and landed on his shoulder. They chirped and jumped up, expressing the joy in their hearts. The secret disciples all had excited expressions. They all fell to their knees. We greet teacher. Qin Yu lifted a hand and stroked the feathers of the two fire phoenixes. With the intensity of his mortal body, he didn't fear their temperature at all. He nodded and said, "Rise." His eyes swept over the crowd. "Has everything been well while I was gone?" A disciple stepped forward. "Reporting to teacher, everything has been fine. It's just that the pheasant you ordered me to take care of still hasn't woken up." Qin Yu frowned. "You are Siyuan." The disciple bitterly smiled. "Yes, I am." In front of him was a thin and pale young man. He was completely different from the chubby little fatty in his memories, but looking carefully, one could tell that they were indeed the same person. In just a few short months, such a heaven-shaking change had occurred. It seemed that something must have happened to this boy's body. "Qin, you didn't have the habit of digging up other people's scars." He nodded and allowed the disciple to leave. "All right, I'm tired from the long journey. I need to rest for a while. You all go and do what you need to do." "Yes, teacher." After everyone dispersed, Qin Yu didn't have time to truly rest. This was because Feng Qing came to visit. Hearing Yun Dai's report, Qin Yu revealed a look of surprise. She didn't even bother to cover herself up. It seemed that she had encountered some trouble. He looked at Dorlice, who was sitting there without any intention of avoiding him. Qin Yu nodded. "Invite her in." Feng Qing followed behind Yun Dai. When she saw Qin Yu, she let out a long sigh of relief. Because of her fluctuating mood, her face was flushed red. In addition, she hadn't tidied herself up after waking up, so her hair was a bit loose. She had a somewhat delicate aura about her. Dorlice winked at him. She was saying, "You brat, you've been pretending all this time, but now you've exposed yourself, right?" Qin Yu ignored her. He smiled and said, "Miss Feng Qing, it's been a while. Please sit." "Thank you, mister." Feng Qing nodded. Then she saw Dorlice sitting to the side and sizing her up. She hesitated for a moment. She had many things she wanted to say, but she absolutely couldn't let outsiders know of them. If it were someone from Sky Declaring Pavilion, she would have directly sent them away. But since it was someone following Qin Yu, Feng Qing could only vaguely express her thoughts. But she underestimated how thick Dorella's skin was. Dorlice calmly sat there, meeting Feng Qing's eyes and even nodding and smiling in greeting. Seeing Feng Qing's awkward and helpless expression, Qin Yu thought for a moment and said, "Su Anluan, it's been a long journey. Go and rest first." The dignified Tao Lord of the West Tomb was a subordinate divinity. Many people knew of Dorella's name. After returning to Sky Declaring Pavilion, she certainly couldn't use it again. Dorlice blinked her eyes and smiled. "But I'm really not tired." Feng Qing took a deep breath. "Mister just returned." It was Feng Qing who came here in a hurry. "You should rest first today. I will visit again in the future." Chapter 801. Feng Qing stiffened. It took a great deal of effort for her to suppress her urge to curse. Qin Yu frowned. Dorlice shrugged. "All right, I promise I won't say anything. Does it hurt to bully your little lover?" Ignoring the latter half of her words, Qin Yu said, "Miss Feng Qing, Su Anluan can be trusted. If there is something you need, feel free to speak." If these words weren't spoken by Qin Yu, Feng Qing would have scoffed at them. If it wasn't his problem, how could he not care? But now that Qin Yu had expressed a stance, she had no grounds to refuse. Otherwise, if she didn't speak of it today, she wouldn't speak of it in the future. She clenched her teeth and said, "Mister, I need your help." She quickly explained her situation, not daring to leave out any details. Her eyes were filled with anxiety, but there was also a look of anticipation. "I know that it is a bit difficult to ask Mister to help, but I really have nowhere else to go. I hope that Mister can help me." As she spoke, she stood up and bowed. Qin Yu lifted a hand, and a strength gushed out from the air to support her. "Miss Feng Qing, there is no need to be like this. Since I promised you that, if it is within my abilities, I will not stand idly by." You don't need to do this. Dorlice curled her lips. For such a great trouble, it doesn't matter if you kneel or not. You can't expect others to kneel just because you did. Her eyes flashed. Moreover, I think your situation isn't simple. It's best if you don't interfere. At this time, Feng Qing really wanted to curse out loud. What does this have to do with you that you need to interrupt? But Qin Yu's silence indicated that this woman's words had a certain weight to them. Before figuring out her identity, Feng Qing could only endure it. Qin Yu glanced at Dorlice. He couldn't be considered to understand this woman, but with her status, there was no need for her to waste time on Feng Qing. If this was the case, then why did she shamelessly insist on staying here? There was likely to be some other mysterious reason. He couldn't guess what it was, but since she didn't hide it from him, Dorlice would definitely speak up. Qin Yu decided to wait and see. He would first follow her intentions. Su Onluin's words are reasonable. Miss Feng Qing, if I help you, I fear there will be great trouble. Feng Qing paled. Mister. If Qin Yu refused, there was nothing she could do. She could only watch helplessly on as she slowly fell into the abyss. Exactly, Feng Qing was extremely sure that if she didn't resist now, then what awaited her would be a boundless abyss. Hey, this little face, this pitiful expression. I really can't help but pity her. Dorlice had a loathsome expression on her face. She pretended to sigh, and then suddenly changed the topic. Qin Yu, I don't think we can't interfere in this matter. After all, we made a promise to others before. It's not good to go back on our word. Dorlice sat up straight and leaned over. She whistled. Little girl, let's make a deal. As long as you agree to be Qin Yu's concubine, we will help you. Qin Yu had just taken a sip of tea when he nearly spat it out. He stuffily coughed and glared at Dorlice. This self-righteous woman. She hadn't even cleared up all of his debts, and yet she still dared to provoke him. Dorlice looked back at Qin Yu and smiled. Do you agree or not? This is your last chance. Think about it carefully. Feng Qing's face flushed red. She didn't think that Qin Yu would make such a request that would take advantage of her. But after waiting for a moment, although his complexion wasn't too good, he didn't say anything to explain. Her heart sank. Feng Qing was angry and embarrassed at the same time. Her face flushed even redder, as if she would leave at any moment. But in the end, she didn't leave. Dorlice was right. This was her last chance. If she didn't want to fall into the abyss, then she could only pay some price. Compared to death, although her innocence was important, it didn't mean she couldn't give it up. Feng Qing looked up at Qin Yu. Mister, Feng Qing is willing to serve you with my pure body. But after that, I ask that you give me my freedom. Before Qin Yu could speak, Dorlice clapped her hands. How straightforward. We agree. You can rest assured and go back. Everything will be fine. Yun Dai's eyes widened. She glared at Dorlice, wishing that she could rush up and tear this woman's mouth to pieces. Teacher was hers. He was hers. Qin Yu's complexion darkened. He watched Feng Qing leave and coldly said, Dorlice, you had better give me an explanation. Feng Qing's gaze just now had indeed made him unhappy. But Qin Yu's current performance was more or less done for Dorlice to see. Stop pretending. I don't believe that you can't see through it. Dorlice faintly smiled. She sighed. Qin Yu, I suddenly feel that your luck is quite good. That woman called Feng Qing just now, do you know what her physique is? Forget it. With your current cultivation boundary, you definitely can't come into contact with her. Let me tell you, her physique is that of a rare spirit soul. Don't you think this name is too ordinary? Humph, humph. If this was the world my main body came from, then once this woman's physique was exposed, it would be enough for all the powerhouses in the world to break their heads. I spent so much effort pretending to be a villain to grab this woman in your hands, and yet you still give me that attitude. Qin Yu said, You aren't lying to me? What's so special about a spirit soul? Dorlice reached out a hand. A spirit soul's only function is to shape the soul. She rolled her eyes at Chinyu. Brat, are you stupid? That's right, I can responsibly tell you that this is the truth. As long as you can control and cultivate a spirit soul to maturity, you can use her as a furnace. As long as you pour your consciousness into it, you can use her soul as the foundation to breed a brand new soul. Chinyu's heart shook. He immediately understood just how precious a spirit soul was. To use the simplest analogy, if he suffered a fatal soul injury, then as long as his consciousness didn't scatter and he poured his consciousness into Fengqing's soul, his soul could be reborn. And for high-level cultivators, besides races like the ancient race that relied heavily on their bodies, the soul was the foundation of everything. Even if one's mortal body was destroyed 100 times, as long as their soul didn't scatter, they could constantly be reborn. You've reacted? Dorlice licked her lips. If it weren't for the fact that my main body can't descend into this world, do you think I would have given you a spirit soul? However, this piece of meat isn't so easy to eat. You should have already guessed what Fengqing said just now. I carefully sensed her and discovered that she is currently cultivating a cultivation method that is used to cultivate a spirit soul. In other words, the teacher she spoke of has been plotting against her from the start. Looking at it from this angle, the two of you are quite similar. Many years ago, both of you were chosen by someone to be a furnace. Don't you think you're in the same boat? Chinyu was expressionless. Let's get down to business. He tapped his fingers together. Since you agreed to help her, you should have a way. Speak. Dorlice sneered. Do you think I'll speak just because you want me to? You're taking all the benefits and not giving me a single bit. How could there be such a good thing in this world? Chinyu had a calm expression. What do you want? Dorlice frowned, deep in thought. Forget it. I won't be able to think of anything for a while. But remember, you owe me a favor today. You will have to pay me back in the future. Okay. Chinyu nodded. He sneered inwardly. This woman was quite smart. She was worried that he would be suspicious, so she deliberately put on such an act. It had to be known that in Dorelice's eyes, Chinyu was a puppet that she was controlling without even realizing it. In the end, whatever Chinyu obtained was also hers. She only did this to make her acting seem more realistic. You're straightforward enough. I'm beginning to appreciate you more and more. Dorlice threw him a flirtatious look. Yun Dai, who had sent Fengqing out, happened to return at this time. As she saw this, she nearly blew up with rage. It's fine if you came here yourself, but you actually dragged another woman into it. Do you think you can't compete with this old lady, so you decided to use a human wave tactic? Dorlice turned to look at him. Chinyu, I think it's best if fewer people know about this, right? Chinyu nodded. Yun Dai, go and rest first. Yes. With a belly full of resentment, Yun Dai clenched her teeth and left. Before she left, she swept her eyes over Chinyu several times. If looks could kill, Dorlice would have turned into dregs by now. Hey, Chinyu, you brat, your luck with women isn't shallow. Don't blame Big Sister for not telling you, but your little apprentice's physique isn't ordinary either. Let's not talk about how many benefits there will be if you accept her. At the very least, that pleasure isn't something an ordinary woman can give you. Chinyu's expression didn't change. Dorlice, put away your little schemes. This sort of numbness has no effect on me. Since we are going to cooperate, let's get straight to the point. Humph. If you don't recognize my good intentions, you brat, there will be a time when you will regret it. Dorlice said with a half-truth, half-lie threat. Chinyu thought to himself, yes, that's right. Let's see who will regret it in the future. It's clear that that girl Fengqing's soul avatar has already been discovered by others. Moreover, what surprises me is that in this world there is actually a cultivation method for cultivating soul avatars. Although it's a bit simple, this sort of slow cultivation method will allow the soul avatar to obtain the best growth. If I'm not wrong, Feng Qing's soul avatar will soon mature. In other words, her teacher will make his move in the near future. There isn't much time left for us to pick peaches. Dorlice had a serious expression. Strictly speaking, I only have the strength of a projection. And with your strength, if you don't use the ancient's heart, it will be impossible for you to contend with the master of sky, declaring pavilion. Thus, when we make our move this time, we must use our wits. Think of a way to have Feng Qing assist us in investigating the background of sky, declaring pavilion's master in the shortest time possible. Only by knowing yourself and your enemy can you respond. Qin Yu nodded. But at this time he didn't know that he didn't need to look for Feng Qing to think of a way. The one Dorlice wanted to scheme against was about to deliver himself to his doorstep. The next day, a blood jade sealed in a transparent jade box was delivered to Qin Yu through the Internal Affairs Division. The moment Qin Yu saw this blood jade, he subconsciously frowned. Perhaps it was because it had fused with the ancient's heart, but he could faintly feel the terrifying strength contained within. However, this strength was a bit strange. It was as if it had been forcefully gathered together, as if it would explode and collapse at any moment. Chapter 802. After leaving the desert world, the ancient had remained silent. This was the first time he had spoken after exterminating the giant spirit clan. The sealed, transparent jade box in front of Qin Yu flew up on its own. A halo of light flashed on its surface, and it slowly opened. After losing the imprisonment of the jade box, the strength contained within the blood jade suddenly went berserk. A roar sounded out from deep within his mind. A chill rose up from his spine, nearly causing his heart to stop beating and his blood to freeze. In the next moment, Qin Yu's consciousness was violently pulled into a scarlet space. Everything around him was the color of blood, as if it had been dyed with blood. His nose and mouth glistened with a nauseating stench. Before he could respond, Qin Yu's consciousness froze. At this moment, he felt as if a great beast had locked onto him and he could be torn to shreds at any moment. At the end of his line of sight, deep within this scarlet space, there was a massive shadow. It lay on the ground, towering like a mountain. As he slowly looked up, a pair of giant eyes locked onto him. The reason Qin Yu's consciousness froze was because of this pair of eyes locking onto him. Suddenly, it opened its mouth and roared. Qin Yu's consciousness buzzed and fell into a blank state. Even so, he instinctively felt a great fear. He felt as if he were being swept away by a hurricane. As he wildly spun around, he would be twisted into countless pieces at any moment. Qin Yu wanted to struggle, but he couldn't do anything. Luckily, this feeling only lasted for a brief moment. With a cold cough, the hurricane that wrapped around him was torn apart. Qin Yu's consciousness instantly returned to his body. He gasped for breath, sweat dripping down his body. In front of him, the teardrop-shaped blood jade emitted a faint halo of light. It was shrouded by an invisible strength, unable to emit any light. Qin Yu didn't know what his fate would have been if his consciousness hadn't been able to break free, but he knew it wouldn't have been a happy ending. "Thank you, my lord, for helping me." The ancient was silent for a moment. Then he smiled. "Strictly speaking, I should be the one thanking you for today's matter. I never thought that after searching for so many years without finding anything, it would actually fall into my hands today." Qin Yu revealed a puzzled expression. The ancient didn't hide anything. He lightly said, "You should be aware of the true appearance of this blood jade, right?" Qin Yu thought for a moment. "Blood? That's right." The ancient said, "I recognize the owner of this drop of blood. Or, to be more accurate, I am the one who created it." Even though he had already expected this, he was still shaken after obtaining confirmation. It was just a drop of blood, but it possessed such terrifying power that he was almost defenseless against it. Then, just how powerful was the owner of this drop of blood that the ancient spoke of? And what was even more terrifying was that this existence that surpassed the limits of imagination was created by the ancient. Qin Yu remained silent. He couldn't help but doubt himself. Facing the powerful consciousness of the ancient, could he really succeed? The ancient continued to say, "In Dragon City, you have already seen the dragon soul hidden deep within the arena. You should know its origins. Back then, I had a premonition that there would be a great calamity in the future. So I slaughtered tens of thousands of dragons and extracted their soul essences to refine the dragon soul. In addition, I refined the corpses of 10,000 dragons and used their blood essence, flesh, and blood to create a body of 10,000 dragons as a carrier for the dragon soul. The reason I did this was to help me deal with the unknown great calamity in the future. But before I could finish, the Tao Monarch's true body arrived. You should already know what happened afterwards. I fell into a trap and was defeated by the Tao Monarch. My body was split apart and suppressed, and only my consciousness survived. Because of the refining process, the dragon's soul remained loyal to me. But I never imagined that as time passed, the myriad dragon body would develop its own consciousness and break through the spells I left behind to escape." Qin Yu composed his thoughts. His eyes flashed. "My lord, are you saying that this drop of blood came from the myriad dragon body?" The ancient said, "That's right." He paused for a moment. "When I refined it in the past, the dragon soul and the myriad dragon body were two parts that matched each other. Only after fusing together could any hidden dangers be eliminated. The myriad dragon body developed its own consciousness and escaped, but it wasn't complete. In addition, when it broke through the spells I left behind, it suffered a heavy backlash. Thus, you can see that its blood is extremely chaotic and on the verge of collapse. After my consciousness awakened, I have been trying to find a way to search for the myriad dragon body. But I haven't found anything. There is another reason for this. The reason I refined it in the past was to increase my chances of dealing with the unknown great calamity, but it was also to leave myself a path of retreat. Even if I am defeated, as long as I complete the refinement, I can extract the strength of the dragon soul and myriad dragon body at any time. As long as my soul doesn't scatter away, I can quickly restore myself and even increase my strength. This is why I said that I should be the one thanking you." Qin Yu cupped his hands together. "Congratulations, my lord." The ancient said, "I should be congratulating you. In my current state, I no longer need their strength. My lord, once I find the myriad dragon body, I have a way to fuse the dragon's soul with it. At that time, I can extract all of its strength and help you break through several levels of your mortal body. Even if you face a divine Tao powerhouse, you will have the qualifications to fight them." Qin Yu had an excited expression. "My lord, are you serious? You are the only hope of my people, so I won't lie to you. But searching for the myriad dragon body must be done by you alone. Otherwise, once it senses my aura, it will be impossible to find it again. This junior will do everything in his power to find the myriad dragon body as soon as possible." After exhorting a few more words, the ancient withdrew. Qin Yu looked up, a sneer on his face. If he didn't already know everything, he might have been moved. But now, as for what the ancient said about helping him obtain the strength of the dragon soul and myriad dragon body, Qin Yu believed this. This was simple. In the eyes of the ancient, Qin Yu was already a puppet under his control. There was no difference between what he had and what the ancient was holding on to. From this perspective, the ancient and Dorellis's minds should be exactly the same. Across from him, Dorlis looked up, a dignified expression on her face. What did that person say? Qin Yu didn't hide anything. He explained everything. Dorlis was secretly shocked. Even with her cultivation boundary, she still found it hard to imagine slaughtering 10,000 dragons. This was truly worthy of being in existence that could fight with the Tao Monarch. Dorlis let out a deep breath and calmed her mind. She said, "Did that person really say that he was willing to help you obtain the strength of the dragon soul and myriad dragon body?" Qin Yu knew that she was suspicious, but he couldn't hide this matter. He could only quietly nod. Indeed. Dorlis frowned. The reason she was willing to help Qin Yu was because he was under her control. But why did the ancient want to help her? Could it be that he had some other method that he could control Qin Yu? After thinking about this for a long time without any results, Doralice touched the back door she left in Qin Yu's body. With a stuffy cough, Qin Yu's complexion paled. He lifted a hand to cover his heart. I suddenly felt uncomfortable just now, as if my heartbeat was out of control. What is going on? Doralice calmed down. Since the back door she left behind was intact, even if the ancient had made some preparations, it was doomed to be useless. She immediately comforted Qin Yu. Perhaps it was because he had just fused with the ancient's heart and hadn't perfectly fused with his mortal body yet. After carefully sensing for a moment and finding no other discomfort, he frowned and slowly nodded. Of course, this was all an act for Doralice to see. She could indeed activate the back door, but as long as Qin Yu wanted to, he could make it disappear with a single thought. At this moment, a thought suddenly appeared in Qin Yu's mind. Doralice and the ancient both believed that they had controlled him. If they used him well, then even if he was the weakest of the three, there was a high chance he could turn the tables and become the final winner. The premise of all of this was that he had to hide himself and absolutely couldn't expose himself. Otherwise, Doralice would be fine, but once the ancient turned hostile, even if he controlled the ancient's heart, he still wouldn't have the strength to resist. Strength. What he needed was an even greater strength. And what the ancient spoke of was the existence of the dragon soul and myriad dragon body. This was clearly the only way he could rapidly increase his strength in a short period of time. He had to find the myriad dragon body. But how to do it? Regarding this matter, Qin Yu still didn't have a clue. But in fact, he didn't need to bother thinking about it. This was because before Qin Yu could take the initiative to look for it, someone had already come knocking on his door. The lakeside building welcomed an honored guest. This guest was an old man with white hair and a white beard. He had a poker face, and his every movement was stiff and stiff. Although there wasn't a clear introduction of his identity, from Feng Qing's respectful attitude, it was enough to know his status. Old Lin, this is Grandmaster Ning Qin. Feng Qing smiled. She said, Mr. Ning Qin, Old Lin is an old friend of my honorable master's. I came here today to ask Mr. Ning Qin for help. After introducing each other, she took a step back and sat down. Old Lin said, Mr. Ning Qin, I apologize for taking the liberty to visit. The reason I came here today is because of that blood jade from yesterday. Qin Yu's complexion darkened. After a long period of silence, he slowly said, Old Lin, if there is something you need, please speak frankly. As if he had already expected Qin Yu's response, Old Lin's expression didn't change. Because this matter is of great importance, my family's master feels apologetic for what happened before. He especially asked me to bring you a gift as an apology. He flipped his hand and placed a wooden box on the table. Qin Yu thought for a moment. He picked up the jade box and opened it. After a moment of silence, he said, The Tower Master is too considerate. His tone relaxed. Old Lin said, The reason the Tower Master came here is to ask Mr. Ning Qin a question. Is there a way to suppress the rampaging strength? Old Lin didn't explain the specifics, but Qin Yu naturally understood. A trace of happiness crossed his heart. Could this be considered another time that someone had delivered themselves to his door? But on the surface, Qin Yu didn't reveal anything. Instead, his eyebrows furrowed even tighter, as if he were in a difficult position. Chapter 803. Old Lin looked deeply at him. Mr. Ning Qin, there is no need to be in such a hurry to refuse. My master has said that if Mr. can do it, he is willing to repay you with 100 times the reward. He pointed a finger at the wooden box. Take this as an example. Qin Yu's complexion changed. What was in the wooden box was the same teardrop-shaped blood jade as before. But the difference was that it was formed from pure strength and the wild attribute had been completely eliminated. In other words, it could be directly absorbed and transformed into strength within the body. 100 times, as long as his mortal body could withstand it, it would be enough for Qin Yu's cultivation to rise. And it just so happened that Qin Yu didn't lack something like a mortal body's ability to withstand it. Of course, even if it wasn't Qin Yu, any other cultivator wouldn't be able to resist the temptation of something that could greatly increase their cultivation. Seeing Qin Yu moved, old Lin continued to say, "Mr. Ningqin, there is no harm in picking up my master's gift and carefully feeling it. The strength contained within it isn't simple." Qin Yu waved his hand. "There is no need. I am well aware of the value of this gift." Besides strength, there was also boundless vitality. 100 of these blood jades could increase one's lifespan by at least tens of thousands of years. After a long period of silence, Qin Yu felt it was about time. He took a deep breath and slowly said, "I can give it a try, but as for how confident I am, I cannot make any promises. If anything goes wrong," old Lin revealed a smile. "Mister, rest assured that no matter what the final result is, my master will not implicate you." Qin Yu relaxed. "Since Tower Master is so sincere, I will give it a try. But Sky Declaring Pavilion will have to bear the losses incurred during this process." Old Lin nodded. "Of course. Mister, feel free to try. If there is anything you need, please tell me directly and I will prepare it for you." "Then there is no problem." Qin Yu stood up and sent old Lin away. Feng Qing had a belly full of words to say, but she knew now wasn't the time to speak. She respectfully followed him away. But soon, she thought of a way to have someone pass on a message. She was really worried that Qin Yu would turn around and cooperate with her teacher, selling her out completely. After all, no matter how confident she was in her appearance, Feng Qing didn't believe that her beauty could compare with the reward her honorable master offered. Qin Yu's reply was very simple. He told Feng Qing not to worry. Since he had agreed to help, he wouldn't go back on his word. It was a simple sentence, yet it inexplicably caused Feng Qing to feel at ease, and the feeling of humiliation in her heart dissipated by more than half before transforming into a type of uneasiness. This was because she suddenly realized that even if she really became Qin Yu's concubine, he would still suffer a great loss compared to the loss he would suffer from rejecting her teacher. Although reason told Feng Qing that this wasn't how things were supposed to be settled, she couldn't continue to be angry or hate Qin Yu. Occasionally, a thought flashed through her mind. If she could really escape, becoming Qin Yu's concubine wasn't something she couldn't accept. Of course, this thought had only just appeared when it was torn to shreds by Feng Qing's flushed face, and she secretly scolded him for being shameless. After disappearing for several months, Grandmaster Ning Qin returned. He basically didn't appear in front of anyone before going into seclusion once more. Some people said that he had received an extremely high-level mysterious mission and was looking for a way to resolve it. Others said that it was because of Mr. Shah. In order to avoid disaster, the restless Ning Qin had no choice but to go into seclusion. To the mid-morning city branch division's Jiangyun, the second theory was simply a joke. Sha Liuha was indeed outstanding, but compared to Grandmaster Ning Qin, the two weren't even on the same level. Although Grandmaster Ning Qin's true status had been hidden for some reason, these sorts of rumors that would damage his reputation had to be strictly put an end to. As several orders were passed down, the rumors soon died down. But in private, the beast trainer circles were abuzz with excitement. It was unknown where the source came from, but many people said that Ning Qin had asked Jiang Yun to step forward and forcefully suppress these unfavorable rumors about him. This caused many people to believe that Qin Yu was truly afraid. There were many people that believed this. After all, in these past months, everyone had seen Sha Liuha's performance with their own eyes. He was truly incomparably powerful, sharp to the point that he could take flight. And in the beginning, Qin Yu had ruthlessly slapped Sha Liuha in front of countless people and then kicked him several times. Who could forget this sort of enmity? At this time, Mr. Shah was left depressed after confirming that Qin Yu had gone into seclusion. It wasn't that he didn't have a chance to take revenge, but that while Chinyu was in seclusion, Yundai and Dorlice had also disappeared with him. The two women hid in the lakeside building and didn't come out. No matter how many methods he didn't have a chance to use them. How could the restless and fiery Sha Liuha endure this? It wasn't that he didn't take action. Through the connections he had accumulated during this time, Sha Liuha had tried to use force to force Chinyu to appear. But just as he tried, an invisible strength would immediately erase everything. Within the Internal Affairs Division, two people with true authority had suddenly revealed problems and been knocked down to the ground. Sha Liuha's heart chilled, and he decisively stopped trying. Although he didn't know who it was, if someone had the qualifications to do this, it wouldn't be too difficult for them to do anything to him. It seemed that the rumor that Ning Qin was currently on a secret mission was very likely to be true. With things having come this far, he could only endure even if he couldn't. Luckily, it wouldn't be long before the Great Beast Trainer competition began, and Qin, you shouldn't be absent. At that time, he would have plenty of chances in the internal eliminations. Yes, that was it. Mr. Shaw thought. A plan rapidly formed in his mind. Not only did he want to obtain these two women in one fell swoop, but he also wanted to return the humiliation Qin gave him 10 times over, 100 times over. Si Yuan sat on a rock by the lakeside, looking at the ruffled surface of the lake. His expression was dull and his empty eyes were filled with pain. His teacher had gone into seclusion. This fact allowed him to relax. But at the same time, he couldn't help but feel pained at his own cowardice. Uncontrollably, the scene of the last time he saw her appeared in his mind. The woman he loved in his heart had been tortured black and blue. He held her in his arms, helplessly watching as she took her last breath. Her unwilling and pained eyes were still wide open as she stared at the gray skies above her head. Si Yuan clenched his fists and bit down on his lips, blood seeping out. "Don't worry. I won't let you die in vain. Those who hurt you will pay the price. This is my guarantee to you. No matter what price I have to pay, even if I die here, I will not turn back." Si Yuan looked up. The clouds in the skies constantly changed. He seemed to see a face smiling down at him from the heavens. At this moment, he suddenly realized that he could only rely on himself in this matter. He was only a secret disciple. He hadn't even seen his teacher's face a few times. So what qualifications did he have for his teacher to take revenge for him? Luckily, on that day when his teacher returned, he didn't impulsively expose his own intentions. Otherwise, before he could do anything, he would have been killed by others and become a muddled ghost in the underworld. With his current strength, it was nearly impossible for him to take revenge. Thus, he absolutely couldn't meet force with force. He could only look for a chance to strike, because once he struck, he wouldn't have a second chance. Buried deep beneath the earth, there was a great hall that was tens of thousands of feet deep. It was grand and magnificent, but looking around, there wasn't a single figure. It was like a giant underground city that had been empty for countless years. Suddenly, in the silence of the underground palace, the sound of footsteps echoed out. The clean and spotless floor was like a mirror, reflecting the figure walking on it. His figure was slender, although it seemed like he was simply walking forwards. Every step he took gave off a heavy feeling. His gentle steps contained endless spiritual strength. His temperament was cold and arrogant, like a 10,000-foot mountain piercing into the endless vault of heaven. When the man stopped, there was a stone gate in front of him that was hundreds of thousands of feet high. He lifted a hand and pressed it. Strength poured out from his palm, and a crack quietly opened up on the stone gate. He took several steps back. When he stood still, a blood-red light erupted from behind the stone gate without warning, tearing apart the desolate and despairing darkness within. "What are you doing here?" A deep and low voice erupted from the blood-red light, like the roar of thunder. The man lightly said, "The great sun step beast trainer I found is still alive." The voice within the stone gate paused for a moment. "Are you confident?" The man said no. "But right now, You and I have no better choice." The voice behind the stone gate sneered. "I am indeed curious. Do you really not fear death? Once you are swallowed by me, you will vanish forever. I think you should be well aware of this." The man was expressionless. "I don't want to answer the same question a second time." "Humph!" The voice behind the stone gate angrily snorted. "Since you want to die, I have no reason to stop you." Rumble, rumble, the blood-red light tumbled. On the surface of the stone gate, runes rapidly lit up, erupting with a radiant purple lightning. Qin Yu tried to make a request. He needed a face-to-face diagnosis in order to find a solution in the shortest possible time. But this request was rejected by Senior Lin without hesitation. From his attitude, Qin Yu could feel his determination. It seemed that if he wanted to confirm the position of the myriad dragon body, he would need to show his qualifications ahead of time. But according to the terrifying strength contained in the blood, wanting to suppress it from going berserk wouldn't be easy at all. As if sensing Qin Yu's dilemma, the ancient transmitted a message to him. After Qin Yu read it, his complexion became strange. "Although the myriad dragon body was refined by me, it has developed its own consciousness in these past years and has inevitably undergone some changes. If I want to smoothly suppress it, I will need to make some other preparations. So there's no rush in time. You can freely display your abilities." After leaving behind these words, the ancient fell silent. Qin Yu rubbed his chin. Why did he feel that these words had a deeper meaning behind them? Perhaps it was possible the lakeside building was quiet for several days. Then, Qin Yu began to make requests. A list of materials was sent to Senior Lin as quickly as possible. Although he was prepared, when Senior Lin saw the list, his eyebrows couldn't help but tremble. But after a brief pause, he composed himself and slowly said, "Give it to him." Qin Yu really did go into seclusion. But this seclusion had nothing to do with suppressing the chaotic strength within the blood jades. He took all sorts of precious materials sent over by Sky Declaring Pavilion and began an extravagant cultivation. Of course, before this, the 10 blood jades filled with the chaotic strength had already been taken away by the ancient. Although he didn't say anything, from the tone of the ancient's voice, it seemed that with these 10 blood jades, the myriad dragon body wouldn't be able to escape. Dragon City, deep within the arena on an altar, the dragon's soul lay on top of the altar, its body so solid that it seemed corporeal. At this time, its eyes suddenly opened, revealing a look of excitement. Hum! Hum! The runes on the altar rapidly lit up. Then, as if it were contagious, the countless runes all lit up. A strength of imprisonment and suppression covered the dragon's soul. It roared out loud, and crackling sounds came from the surface of its body. Tiny arcs of purple lightning jumped about, causing it to reveal a pained expression. But this time the dragon's soul didn't lower its head like it usually did. It stood up, its deep eyes seeming to pierce through the barriers of space and fall into the endless distance. After countless years, it could finally feel the aura of its own body once more. "My master, have you finally found it?" In other words, after enduring hundreds of thousands of years of imprisonment, it was finally about to end. Roar. Chapter 804. Qin Yu's incomparably luxurious cultivation had reached its peak. But now he had no choice but to temporarily stop. Si Wenyu, who was responsible for looking after the chicken overlord, had found Yun Dai. The elder disciple didn't dare to be careless. He hurriedly went to investigate, and after hesitating over and over again, he blushed red and reported this news to his teacher. Qin Yu looked at the elder disciple's rosy cheeks and watery eyes. Before she spoke, she revealed a bit of bashfulness and a bit of a strange expression. As he listened to her mumble some vague words, he decided to temporarily leave seclusion. This chicken overlord fellow was truly as unreliable as ever. To the outside world, it was announced that the chicken overlord was Qin Yu's spirit pet. Even though it was in a deep, slumbering state, no one dared to neglect it. The residents, wasn't too far away from the lakeside building. It was a specially built spirit pet room. As Chinyu stepped in, he immediately understood why the Jade Archive had such an expression. On a clean and tidy bed covered with a soft silk blanket, the chicken overlord was sleeping soundly. But right now, its breathing was a bit tight, and it would occasionally whimper from its mouth and nose, its body twitching a few times. As he looked down, he saw a hard strand of hair poking out of the feather and exposed to the air. Although it didn't look big, compared to the size of a pheasant, it should be considered talented. No wonder this fellow loved to have a harem. It turned out that he was rich. He shook his head, suppressing the chaotic thoughts in his mind. Although he was prepared, he was still a bit stunned upon seeing this. Chinyu swept his eyes over his eldest disciple, whose face was flushed red and who occasionally glanced at the chicken overlord and then back at him. Chinyu's lips twitched. He asked, "How long has the situation been going on?" Si Yuan replied respectfully, "Teacher, it started yesterday." He paused for a moment. In the past, this sort of situation would occasionally occur, but it would quickly recover. But this time it has been going on for a long time, and its aura is a bit unstable. This disciple doesn't dare to be careless, so I asked Senior Apprentice Sister Yundai to report this. Chinyu rubbed between his eyebrows. Although he felt a bit embarrassed, if the chicken overlord continued to act so shamelessly, he feared it would be even more shameful. Thinking for a moment, he walked in front of the bed and placed a hand on its body. After sensing it for a moment, a dignified expression appeared on his face. This fellow's current situation was far worse than he had imagined. He actually felt like his strength was going berserk and out of control. With the intensity of this strength, if it were to truly erupt, then in the blink of an eye it would turn the chicken overlord into a fragrant roast chicken. It was just a nap, yet he could cause such a serious problem. There was no one else in the world who could do that. Chinyu was left speechless for 3 seconds, but things had already happened. Although the roast chicken tasted good, he still had to save those that needed to be saved. Moreover, with the chicken overlord's current situation, he feared he couldn't delay any longer. "Cough! Yundai, come over and see if you can find the reason." At this time, the Chaotic Sky Chronicle was the best choice. "Yes, teacher." Yundai walked over, her face turning even redder. She thought to herself, "I'm still a young lady. Teacher, if you stand with me like this, you'll have to take responsibility for me in the future." Thinking of this, his heart was filled with joy. 70 to 80% of his panic disappeared, and he began to mobilize the power of the Book of the Chaos. A moment later, Yundai's eyes were filled with exhaustion, and her expression became strange. She thought for a moment and then closed her eyes to confirm it once more. If the result was the same as the first time, then there should be no mistake. Dorlice looked at the chicken overlord lying on the bed with its flag raised high. Even though she was experienced and knowledgeable, she still couldn't help but take a few more glances. Today's events were simply too strange. The chicken overlord's condition certainly couldn't be hidden from her eyes. After a brief inspection, she knew that it was receiving some sort of strength inheritance in its slumber. This was the strange part. Generally speaking, when it came to strength inheritance, the difficulty lay in obtaining approval. As long as the inheritance began, there shouldn't be any problems. After all, an existence that left behind a strength inheritance clearly hoped to pass down their own cultivation. It was impossible for them to play their successor to death. But something had happened to the chicken overlord, and it was because it had sunk deep into its heart demons and was unable to extricate itself. Well, this was yet another strange phenomenon. Would heart demons appear during the strength inheritance process? That's right, there was a certain chance. But this sort of heart demon was of a very low level. As long as one focused their mind to resist it, they could directly dispel it. But the chicken overlord in front of them was clearly stuck in a deep pit, and its soul had been invaded by heart demons. It was about to lose control of its strength and play itself to death. Combining Yundai's diagnosis Everyone present, including Dorlice, came to a conclusion. The chicken overlord had brought this upon itself. To put it simply, the chicken overlord had encountered a heart demon during the process of receiving an inheritance. Then it thought that this heart demon was very interesting and didn't want to come out so easily. As a result, it played around with it until it went out of control. A heart demon was a heart demon. It also had its own dignity and couldn't be toyed with just because it didn't seem too fierce. Thus, it had become this current scene. As for what sort of heart demon the chicken overlord had encountered, looking at its current hard posture, there was no need to explain it. Qin Yu rubbed his forehead. He wished he could personally take action and strangle this shameful thing to death. This was really too shameful. Because heart demons were very erotic, it had nearly lost its life playing with them. This sort of thing wasn't unprecedented, but no one present had ever heard of it before. If news of this were to spread out that spirit pets behaved in such a manner, then, as its master, he feared he would be ridiculed 10,000 times over. TSK, 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 TSK. Dorlice looked at Qin Yu, sighing again and again. It was only today that this old woman finally saw his true face. At this moment, Qin Yu really did have an impulse to wash his hands of this matter. He wanted to let this chicken overlord perish on its own. It would be best if it played itself to death as soon as possible so that it wouldn't stir up more trouble in the future. What a sin! Qin Yu took a deep breath. He ignored Dorlice's expression and directly said, I heard that the Western Tomb has a powerful divine art that specializes in breaking heart demons. You should be able to use it, right? That's right. But in my current state, if I were to use it once, I would immediately fall into a weakened state. I wouldn't be able to leave my bed for at least 10 days to half a month. The price to pay is not small. Qin Yu had no expression. Speak. What do you want? Dorlice smiled. I like dealing with straightforward people like you. I heard that during this period of time, you pulled out many good things from Sky, Declaring Pavilion. As for what they are, I won't ask. Just give me half. The corners of Qin Yu's eyes twitched. He looked at the chicken overlord that was lying on the bed, completely bewitched by its heart demons and unable to wake up. He suddenly felt that eating a delicious roast chicken wasn't a bad choice. All right, I agree. Dorlice was satisfied. With these things, she would be able to think of a way to stay in this world for a longer period of time. After all, Qin Yu could be said to be the most successful adventure she had ever taken in her life. She had to help him overcome his difficulties. If he was good, then she was good. What a simple truth. Qin Yu clenched his teeth and handed over half of the remaining things to Dorlice. Even though he had picked them up for free, his heart still raced with pain. It wasn't that he didn't have any prospects, but that every single one of them was a treasure. If he used them to cultivate, there was simply no one else that could compare to the speed at which he cultivated. This debt would be noted down. Once the chicken overlord woke up in the future, he would slowly take it back, and there would also be interest. Although Dorlice appeared to be a very unscrupulous person, when it came to matters like this, she was still a very professional person. Taking benefits from others was one reason. But the other key reason was that she discovered that this unreliable fellow, the chicken overlord, had somehow managed to stumble upon some sort of dog's hit luck and obtain an incomparably reliable inheritance. Even in Dorlice's eyes, this sort of inheritance was top class. As long as she could overcome this current crisis and wait for this fellow to wake up, adapt, and control the strength within his body, then he would immediately become a powerful helper. What was Qin Yu's was also hers. With this simple concept in mind, Dorlice certainly didn't have any reason to slack off. She was already imagining the scene of her holding Qin Yu in her left hand and the chicken in her right. If anyone didn't submit, then she would crush them without any hesitation. Boundless holy light gushed out from nothingness. It was like a great sun had risen from the ground. If it weren't for the arrangements she made ahead of time, the entire mid-morning city would have been illuminated. Dorlice began to chant. Strange syllables were incomprehensible, but the holy light that flooded her eyes was like an army that had received an order. It rapidly gathered together, flowing like a great river as it continuously poured into the chicken overlord's body. Even though it was unconscious, one could clearly see that this fellow's body suddenly straightened, and it nearly shot up from the bed. The scale of that hard thing suddenly rose several times in the air. To borrow a phrase, blue veins bulged out on that person's forehead, making him look fierce and cruel, as if he would spit out several mouthfuls of blood at any moment. Then the chicken overlord really did spit out blood. It wasn't hard, but countless wounds instantly opened up on its skin that were hidden beneath its fur. Blood dyed the blanket red, and its body violently twitched, as if it could pass out at any moment. Dorlice quickly withdrew her hand, and the holy light rapidly dispersed. She turned around with an innocent expression. "You really can't blame me for this. You didn't tell me ahead of time that this chicken's strength is of the fire attribute." She explained. The general meaning was that although the attribute of holy light seemed gentle, the truth was that it was a masculine type. Using a divine technique to help the chicken overlord wasn't a problem, but now that its strength had fallen into chaos, a single spark could ignite a prairie fire. This was no different from pouring oil into a fire. Qin Yu was left speechless. He didn't know that divine technique treatment actually had such a restriction. He hurried forwards to inspect it. Luckily, the chicken overlord's life was tough enough. Even though it had been ruthlessly tossed around in this state, it still tenaciously lived on. Moreover, he didn't know if it was because it had lost too much blood or if it had been tossed around, but the chaotic strength within its body had been vented. That hard thing actually slumped down. Although it still looked a bit restless, it wouldn't be able to do so for some time. Could this be considered a blessing in disguise? Dorlice's words ruined Qin Yu's mood. "This matter isn't over yet. Although it isn't my fault, I still need to make things clear to you. Don't look at how this chicken is fine right now, but the divine technique I used just now has already stimulated its heart demons. It won't be long before it recovers a bit, and its heart demons will definitely return. At that time, we will be in deep trouble." Qin Yu furrowed his eyebrows. He suddenly discovered that this matter was extremely troublesome. He turned to look at Yundai. "Do you have any good suggestions?" For the time being, the existence of the chaotic Sky Chronicle was only known to the two of them and the Dark Parliament. In order to avoid trouble, the fewer people that knew about it the better. Yundai nodded. "This disciple does know of a method that should be useful." "Teacher, have you heard of the Ice Soul Jade Bed?" "I don't know. Just tell me." Yundai said, "In the legends, the Ice Soul Jade Bed is a treasure that was discovered in some extremely cold land. Its origins are unknown, and the one who refined it is uncertain, but its effects are incomparably formidable. For instance, if a cultivator were to cultivate on it, they could clear their mind and drive away their thoughts. It could also temper their soul and consciousness and strengthen their cultivation. In particular, for beast trainers, it has the effect of awakening their soul and giving them inspiration. However, according to what this disciple knows, the Ice Soul Jade Bed has another formidable effect, and that is to awaken the soul and consciousness. The chicken overlord's current situation is that its consciousness has fallen deep into its heart demons and is unable to extricate itself. But as long as it can wake up, dispelling its heart demons isn't difficult at all." Qin Yu's eyes brightened. "Where is the Ice Soul Jade Bed you spoke of?" Yundai glanced at the bright-eyed Dorlice. "This disciple doesn't know, but I heard that many years ago it was collected by some great figure in the Beast Trainer Alliance. Since then, it hasn't appeared again." "Beast Trainer Alliance?" Qin Yu was no longer the same as when he first arrived here. He had a certain understanding of the matters of this world. If the Beast Trainer Alliance that Yundai spoke of wasn't a loose organization, then it should be the strongest influence in this world, without a doubt. Of course, even if this organization had many flaws, no one had the guts to provoke them. Qin Yu carefully thought about it and dispelled the idea of using the ice soul jade bed. Then he could only think of a way to borrow it. Sky Declaring Pavilion, Western Tomb, Dark Parliament, these three were absolute titans. If he had them take action, it shouldn't be too difficult, right? Qin Yu thought for a moment and then summoned Siyuan. He had him take care of the chicken overlord and closely observe it. If there was anything wrong, then he had to immediately report it. The reason was simple. For this sort of shameful matter, the fewer people that knew about it the better. He hurriedly went to see Senior Lin, who was staying in Mid-Morning City. Of course, Qin Yu would change his explanation. For instance, when he was preparing medicines, he would need the ice soul jade bed to refresh his mind. After all, Yundai had said that this was a very useful treasure for beast trainers. Yundai felt uncomfortable being stared at by Dorlise. She glared at her and then turned to leave. Behind her, Dorlise wasn't angry. Instead, she rubbed her chin and chuckled several times. She suddenly discovered that this little disciple of hers, Qin Yu, seemed to know a bit too much. Moreover, with Qin Yu's cautious temperament, he didn't doubt her words at all and directly believed her. It seemed that this little girl Yundai was hiding some sort of secret on her body. Dorelice's eyes turned and she turned to leave. She wasn't in a hurry to find out what it was. Even your teacher is one of my people. Do you think a love-struck little girl like you can escape from this old lady's grasp?